Hello everyone and welcome to tonight's school committee meeting. We have guests tonight, which is always fun. I would like to ask the members of the girls cross country team to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, we are down 2 members, but we have enough for a quorum, so we will continue with the consent agenda, the minutes from November 29th, 2018, and oath to bills and payroll.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda as read.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. We have 2 sections in the meeting for input from interested citizens, one at the beginning of the meeting, one at the end. We do have an agenda item on the snow day cancellation pilot program. If anybody's here that would like to comment on that, if you want, you can wait till after we give the presentation and then you can maybe have some more context to make your comments on. But if you want to do it now, you need to leave earlier than you think you can stay for that, that's fine. Or if you have anything else you want to talk about in front of the school committee, you can do it now. We also have another section at the end of the meeting to allow for that as well. Is there any public input? All right, seeing none, thank you. We'll jump right into recognition. Mike Lynn is here as the athletic director, and we mentioned the girls cross country team is here.
Well, glad to be back here again. I think some of these girls are on first name basis with members of the school committee at this point because we've been here, several of them have been here 3 times now. Our cross country team went undefeated and won their district meet and then eventually won their state meet for the first time ever. We actually had the individual state champion too as well, and Sarah Rothman, who I'll bring up in just a minute. And we're going to bring up each of the members of the team and they'll receive their commemorative plaques. We also have a commemorative plaque for Superintendent Dr. Schcmte, and I'll start with Mackenzie Clark.
Thank you.
You get ready for a group picture?
Something you used to. Aren't you glad you
Mackenzie's
went first?
Oh, yeah.
Mackenzie's sister Riley Clark. It's a pretty awesome picture on this plaque, by the way. It was when we had snow on the ground, and it's a pretty neat picture. So, Callie Morvay? She's not here, right?
No, she's at Walt.
What's that? Walt Disney World, right? Hannah Orton? Shay Reagan? Caitlin Rothman? And Sarah Rothman. Ted's not here. We have a volunteer assistant coach, Ted Painter. He's not able to be here tonight, but did want to recognize him. And of course, we have our head coach of boys and girls cross country, plus girls indoor track and girls outdoor track, Art Saucier. And we wanted to give Dr. Schcmte another plaque for his wall there.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Want to get in there? No, I don't need to be in it, but I think it'd be neat if Dr. Schcmte,
You should be.
You guys are used to this. Okay. This will be a good one. I'll get another one of that.
all right, I guess we're jumping in here.
There we go. Here, we'll hold it one.
Nah.
Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Don't run away, there's parents here.
Oh, Dad.
Oh, he's got a real camera.
Oh, yes. He's cool like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, look at that, right on, nice.
If you look closely, there is a snowman on the trophy. That's our ace player award.
Well done. Thinking of the moment.
That was actually, who made that?
Me.
So, thanks again for allowing us to be a part of the agenda tonight, and we'll be adding to our street signs in the near future. And,
Need another
congratulations again to this.
We're gonna need a bigger street sign.
We
Kelly
do,
Lindsay's gonna need a
we
bigger
actually have to
office.
we have to reconfigure the street signs, because we're not allowed to add another level onto it, so we gotta figure that out.
Don't let Coach Saucier rest on his laurels, girls. You guys got 2 more seasons to go, right? All right. I'm going to go to the podium for the next recognition. At this point, we're going to recognize Dr. Jerry Lynn Ajamian, who is retiring as our curriculum director from the Littleton Public School District. She's been with us for 12 years, which is obviously a very good run. 12 years? Oh yeah, that's how long I've been here too. And Steve Mark. So we've had quite a bit of continuity here, but transition is inevitable, so here we go. Prior to coming to Littleton, Jerry Lynn started in education, as virtually all administrators do, in the classroom, where she taught history at the middle school and high school level. She then got her MAT in Education and American History from Boston College, and then continued to pursue doctoral studies at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, focusing on curriculum development. As an administrator, she worked for the Mass Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, serving in the Accountability and Targeted Assistance Unit. She also served in the Safe and Drugs-Free Schools Unit. She included, her duties included being liaison to underperforming schools in Lawrence and New Bedford, as well as the review of consolidated federal grants. She was the Director of Instructional Services for the secondary level at the Marlborough Public Schools. And then she came here to Littleton, where she's going to finish out her career. She has been a leader for the district in virtually every aspect of curriculum development. And over the 12 years, as I've mentioned, in the 12 years that I've been on the school committee, we've seen more changes in curriculum in our public schools here in Massachusetts than we saw it in the 20 years prior to that. Things like an MCAS, a new MCAS, potentially switching to the PARCC test, which was a long process for us to evaluate. The introduction of informative assessments such as MAP, the integration of social and emotional learning into our curriculum in classrooms, and the vast increase in technology to deliver curriculum in the classroom. And that's all on top of the standard curriculum development efforts, like just looking at textbooks and trying to decide which one are the right ones for all of our different subject areas. Jerry Lynn accepted every one of these challenges and was tireless in her efforts. Her effectiveness is evident in the too long to reiterate list of accolades and recognition that Littleton Public Schools have been receiving over those 12 years. A few of us who have been here for a while also remember that several years ago, Jerry Lynn faced significant health issues, and none of us were exactly sure what was going to happen, but she managed to battle all the way back, and because she was able to do that, she'll be exiting on her own terms now, and with all of our schools in terrific shape, and because of her ability to come back and continue to contribute over those 12 years, we've benefited tremendously for that, and she should be very proud of the work she's done, and really be happy that she's been able to exit on her own terms. So congratulations. It'll be a tough transition, but well, we're very happy for you. I think we have we have a couple of citations. From the Commonwealth of Massachusetts House of Representatives, be it hereby known to all that the Massachusetts House of Representatives offers its sincerest congratulations to Jerry Lynn Ajamian in recognition of your retirement as the Director of Curriculum after 12 years of dedicated service with the Littleton Public Schools. The entire membership extends its very best wishes and expresses the hope for future good fortune and continued success in all endeavors. And that's signed by Speaker of the House Robert DeLeo and our State Representative Jim Arciero. We also have a similar recognition from the State Senate, signed by President of the Senate Karen Spilka, Clerk of the Senate William Welch, and our State Senator James Eldridge. All right. And then on behalf of the Littleton Public Schools, we'd all like to give you this clock. All right, remember your time here in Littleton. Thank you very much. I gotta be honest, I really gave some serious consideration to waiting till after the MCAS presentation was done. Because I figured that would be, at that point, you'd be done. But there are some people who want to leave.
Should I stay up at the podium?
You have to stay, well, yeah.
My clock.
All right. Student representative report.
Hello, everyone. So at Shaker Lane this last week that we have, they would like to thank parents for attending the conferences over the past 2 weeks. They appreciate the partnership in educating their students, and they wish everyone a wonderful holiday season and a Happy New Year. Littleton Middle School on December 10th, 3 representatives from the New England League of Middle Schools visited LMS for the Spotlight School application. They were very pleased with what they saw throughout the day. Mrs. Temple will be notified in the coming weeks if the middle school will continue to be a Spotlight school. On December 11th, a group of 27 Latin students in grades 6 to 8 participated in the Medusa mythology exam. And the middle school winter concert was Tuesday in Littleton High School with the auditorium. And the high school is looking forward to winter break. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, moving into presentations, we have a presentation on the pole vault project at the track.
So I'm going to defer more to Mark on this. He's more the expert on this project. This has been his baby from the beginning. And my only concern was the engineering of how the runway and the landing area would fit into our current track facility. And once we were comfortable with what you see up on the TV there, I was happy with the plan. So Mark is here though with some more details, I think.
Well, I'd like to thank Darrell Baker and the PMBC, and of course Mike, for helping move this project along. You know, as you know, when the track was originally built 5, 6, 7 years ago, for reasons at that time we didn't include it. Since then, we've changed leagues, changed divisions where pole vault is contested. Obviously, not being able to contest it put us at a disadvantage. So I sort of took it as a pet project to try to get pole vault here back at Littleton. We had it some number of years ago, but when they built the new track, we didn't include that. So working with the PMBC and with Mike, we've gotten this far where we now have a design proposal for it. I have secured funding for it through donations, through selling cookie dough from the track kids, putting on road races. I have essentially $12,908 in hand. The estimate, as you can see up there, with the contingency is for a little bit over that. Quite frankly, if I have to, I'll just write a check for it. I want this to go through. This is the construction phase. We still have the next phase, which are the pole vault pit and equipment, but you know, this is the important part to get that in. Hopefully, the school department will concur and agree to go forward on this, and I'll continue to work with the PMBC to get this built, probably not now, but in time for the next spring season.
Joe, got some input from the PMBC review?
Yeah, I mean, we put on contract a company to do the design, prep, and they'll are in position already to prep the bid documents. They gave us the engineering estimate, so that's ready actually to go out. But before we released it, committed the town towards funding that, we wanted to make sure that we had the funding in line. And you know, since this was really not part of our planned budget process there, I wanted to make sure it came before the committee and we'd vote to that sufficient funding has been identified and arranged that we can open a project, because the billing will go to the school department for it. So we need to make sure that everything is in place to do that.
Okay. Mark, you mentioned that you have essentially have the amount of, what was the amount of dollars you cited? 11,000?
Right now, I've got 12,908.
12,908. So what's the process Do we have to get that, I mean, you have commitments, but you don't have the money. Do you like, is the money, like you cash checks
Well,
into your fundraising account?
Most of it
for-
is already deposited in the Littleton Athletic Booster account.
Okay,
The balance of it are for organizations that I'm treasurer of,
okay.
so it's a matter of me writing a check to LABA.
Okay.
And the full amount
So
will
you've
be
got
in there.
most of the money into your LABA account with a few more checks to get in there.
Yeah.
And then that has to be gifted to us, I think is the process, to the school department?
Because the town will run the project and there's no budget line item identified for this
Right.
project, so it would have to be sort of backstopped by a school account.
Right.
There, so the process I would envision forward here is if the committee votes to proceed with the project, we need to make arrangements that that account gets created, and then I'll notify the PMBC that it's okay to release the
Okay.
request for bids.
Versus, so we're not gonna write checks out of the LABA account to cover the cost, it'll be written
No,
out.
it'll be,
Right.
because it needs to be run by the town and by the school
Okay.
department.
Right. Okay.
They're not an
All right.
outside
All right.
organization.
And then, do we know roughly what the estimate is for the equipment? What is the equipment? It's basically the pads that go into the pit for the landing area, correct?
Yeah, it's what they call the pole vault pit, which are all the pads that go around it. The standards, those are the vertical structures
Yeah.
that hold the pole that they jump over.
Okay.
And then the pole itself.
Okay,
Estimates for that, depending upon what route we elect to take, are we can buy a refurbished used one for about 10 to 12,000.
okay.
There are used ones available, in fact, Holy Cross has one for about 7,000.
Okay.
Or we can go for new equipment, again, based on what version we get, in the vicinity of 19 to 20,000.
So 7 to 20,000, depending on how we go. What are we thinking in terms of, like, that's, I mean, the low end is not necessarily an insignificant amount, but the higher end is a fairly high
Right.
number for capital relative to some of the other things that we typically budget.
Well, see, that's why I
High.
wanted to make sure we have a funding plan, because this has not been identified in any, even the equipment, the pit. There, I don't know where, that funds haven't been identified to be expended this year, so there's no project that could purchase the supporting equipment. Because unless we started planning that as part of the 20 budget.
Right.
And, and I'd expect that, it would be bubbling up through the administration
Mhm.
via the budget there. Which just gives me a little pause in terms of if we have a disconnect of getting the box installed and then the availability of the equipment to actually run the program, I guess I just question that a little bit.
Right.
Well, my goal is similar to what I call the construction phase, to seek funding for that. I've already got several plans in place. I don't have money, but I thought, it'd probably be easier, from my perspective, to fundraise for the equipment if we at least have the infrastructure to support the
Sure,
equipment.
certainly, yeah, that makes sense to a degree.
And I was kind of reluctant to start
Right.
fundraising for the pit,
Right.
I mean, for the the other equipment, until, I knew in fact that, okay, the rest of it's gonna be built.
What's the potential, if you are able to do some fundraising, but there is the likelihood that you're gonna continue? I guess I'm asking if you need more time if you're confident that you could raise the money, but it's gonna be a question of time, because you wanna run more road races, you wanna do things like that. Is there any mechanism by which the town or the school department can front the cost and then be reimbursed back through donation?
That's a possibility.
It's a
We'd have to look
possibility.
at some accounts and see if we have the funds
Okay.
available. in
Right,
some of
so
those
it's a
other
cash flow
accounts,
issue
but-
from us, but if we have the cash flow to manage it,
Correct.
then we could allow, conceivably be
We
reimbursed.
could figure that out, as long as the payback, was within.
Yeah, there's some other options. I've been sort of reaching
Right.
out to other people in the pole vault community, and there's a potential of being able to borrow a system for next year.
Right.
Which would be ideal, because then that would give us, we'd be able to have the program in place and running.
Right.
Or jumping. and,
Running
you know,
engine.
fundraising in parallel. That's, you know,
Okay.
that could happen. And
Okay.
again, I'm sort of reaching out to find out other options, you know, on getting equipment, again, either used or new.
Okay.
If we wanted to include the equipment in an FY20 capital request to the town, we'd have to go and amend our
Right.
capital list that we've already submitted, but, I mean, we could do that with school committee approval and stuff, so.
I mean, I'm inclined to, I think Mark's been pretty successful in terms of, it's a, you know, significant effort on his part and successful effort to fundraise to this level. I'm not saying that he's got to go out and get more, but, you know, I feel like we could probably make that work. And it sounds like even, especially if you could borrow a system for a year, I think that gives us all a chance to, you know, then we could conceivably put it in the 2021 capital, gives us, you know, some more flexibility. And maybe it's a, you know, combination of fundraising and support through the capital budget.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to the project. It's just that since it came out of budget cycle
Right.
here, you know, and I guess I gotta say I'm not quite happy about that there, because it caught me by surprise in terms of both from the budget perspective as well as the project's perspective there. You know, given the amount of funds already identified and raised, I'm comfortable proceeding with it. Yeah.
Eric, you have any?
Can we make a motion to say yes to this, provided the money is reimbursed, or?
The money for this?
For the structure,
Ju-
for the building?
just for this?
Yes.
Yeah, so my motion would be is to approve the PMBC to release the bid request for this and start executing the project, pending transfer of funds to a school account that we can, because I'll need to give the PMBC that account number
Yeah.
to issue the purchase order.
Is that your motion?
That would be my motion.
Do I hear a second? All right, okay, is there any further discussion? I think we have consensus, I think we're gonna support it, but I think we have consensus on the rest of it. I think you hear what our concerns are. We appreciate the amount of effort we put in, but as Daryl said, you know, this is outside the scope of our planning, which is fine to a degree, as long as it's continued to be supported by funding outside of our planning, because we have plans for our funds. And, you know, we could have put this on the list and it would have been supported to a degree. The question is always, you know, with that kind of thing is, what's the priority of this effort relative to the other things that we need to get done? So as long as we keep that in mind as we move forward with, you know, completing it, which the build is one thing, but it is a significant effort in terms of equipment. It's not like, you know, hurdles or, you know, that kind of thing. But obviously, there's been a change in the way you guys compete. It's a tremendous program. You guys are very successful, and more importantly, it's a lot of kids to participate in the track program. So I think this is a good idea to continue to support it and move it forward. So is there any other further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. All right, good, thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
So I'll work with the town too and figure out the right
Yeah,
account to put it
yeah,
in.
and then just coordinate that through Mike
Yep.
and Mark.
Yeah, and I'll let the PMBC know that we can move forward. I mean, realistically, just the bids are gonna go out, construction won't obviously occur
Right,
until.
right.
Until spring.
Right.
All right, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, next under presentations is the snow day cancellation pilot program.
We're gonna cancel snow days.
You gotta read that carefully.
Good luck with
Keep
that.
your context.
Snow day makeup.
Snow day cancellation, snow day cancellation avoidance pilot,
Yes, or something like that.
something like that.
Alternate learning.
Alternate structure.
Well, here we are again. The title now of our efforts, the overall title of our efforts, the overall, the new lexicon is snow day cancellation pilot, to represent what Littleton is planning and proposing to meet the alternative structured learning day programs requirement, for programs set forth by DESE. And since the October 25th presentation to the school committee, we have been involved in a number of fronts and endeavors, and I'll be providing a short overview with Mrs. Steele and Principal Bizidlo and Justine Muir. We have the educators and administrators at each level have been busy formulating the learning activities and instructional planning at each level. At the secondary level, efforts at the secondary level involve creating a lesson plan rubric that capture the standards, elements of student choice, length to complete the assignment, and opportunities to connect reading and writing across the curriculum. It was very interesting, the instructional planning template that would be utilized across grades 6 through 12 and different departments went through 7 iterations. I mean, it started with, just a couple basics, and we had a instructional planning group involved with the administrators, the 2 principals, curriculum coordinators, faculty, special ed, and it went through 7 iterations because you want to capture the nuances. And then that was the educational, the adult instructional planning, and then beginning to lay out what would be the learning activities for students. And we're very grateful for the support from the school department in that substitute coverage was provided for each of the academic departments, and an option for health and PE as well, 1 half day for each department. First, meeting separately at the high school level, for example, the ELA, and then at the middle school level, math, so that the teachers would collaborate together and come together, and you'd have that cross-fertilization. And that was, that involved over 60 or 70 faculty members. Most were positive. They're very conscientious. Also, and I emphasize the conscientiousness in the planning of our faculty, and that echoes what Principal Temple and Principal Bizidlo said in the school council meetings that I attended. Mr. Fontanella, you said, reach out to parents prior to the January presentation, and important venues for that parent outreach were the school councils. And Mrs. Steele and I have met with each of the school councils, and the principals' voices were key in showing how the snow day cancellation pilot would flesh out and a practical educational reality for students, their student populations at different levels. And they also talked about how faculty members approached it. And each of the principals emphasized the conscientiousness that the educators, with which the educators approached this project. Also, there was a letter that Dr. Kunji and I penned to provide a helicopter view of certain essentials of the snow day cancellation pilot. And the one sentence in the letter that I would like to emphasize now, and we would like to, for all to keep in mind going forward, is that we are a pre-K to 12 district, and as a pre-K to 12 district divided into elementary, middle, and high schools, we are working to create a model that's flexible within the district, within schools, and maybe even within grade levels. And that flexibility is key. There may be some, for example, if each of the principals came up and talked about what's going on in their schools, or you attended each of the school council meetings and listened to the discussion with parents, you would hear certain things repeated, and that does not equate to redundancy. There would be recurring themes or things that we would reinforce, but there would also be some things that would be different at the primary school versus the high school. We're not finished yet with fleshing out some complexities and challenging issues that we're grappling with. And we would say at this point, some of the issues that we are grappling with that we decided to take a look at seriously since the initial proposal was to implement interim marking times or interim submission or due dates for submission of student work, not waiting until the May 15th deadline. It's like taking a second look at things. We did not want to reflect the practice in some of the other districts of having assignments due June 1st, and we thought moving it forward would be beneficial. But then we thought about weighing student responsibilities and family goals, short-term and long-term, and maybe for instructional planning and students' organizational skills, it would be best to have certain interim due dates. And we are also grappling with expectations around the completion of work for a number of days based on differing amounts of snow days. That question that you had asked before, we're grappling with different scenarios. There are pluses and minuses, pros and cons to different approaches. And right now, we're taking a look at different ways to approach the issue of what if we have 3 snow days? What if we have 4 or 5 snow days? And we have not come to a consensus on that point yet. We are gathering the materials thus far in packets to present to the school committee as you requested, and it will probably be a representative sample of most of the assignments. For example, at the elementary level, you would see across different disciplines, or if it was a thematic approach, you would say maybe see 1 day or 2 days of the 5. And then maybe a jigsaw reading of assignments at the secondary level, because the assignments at the secondary level are course-based. So that's where we are in terms of the planning from the time, including setting forth central tenets or repeating central tenets of the program in the letter from Dr. Clinchy and myself. And we had a planning meeting this afternoon, and Principal Bizillo is going to be giving a little bit of a summary from a principal's point of view, and then Ms. Mueller from Pupil Services.
So I just have one question. So when we get the examples, so what you're saying is, I'm not gonna be able to do 12 weeks of work and graduate like Billy Madison did through each group. I'm only gonna get a sample. All right, I just wanna make sure I
Okay.
understood that. Yeah, that's okay.
I don't want to, I don't want to stress you.
Hi, folks. Thanks for having us. I will repeat several of the things Dr. Jamin said, with a little bit of a slant from the building-based perspective. We heard the presentation from Dr. Jamin and some of our instructional leads at a previous meeting. On behalf of the other building principals and assistant principals, I want to provide a brief update from a building perspective. The first thing I want to remind folks is that this pilot was developed with significant parent and teacher support, and that's why we went into it. And I think as your educational leaders, it's important for us, for everyone not only in this room but in town, to understand that we are dedicated to cutting-edge learning opportunities for kids. And so there have been some questions about how can you replicate teaching and learning in the classroom? What will this be like? Are you shortchanging the opportunity for teachers and students to work together? And we don't see it like that. We see it as a creative opportunity to work with students in a different way and create a creative and valuable learning experience. One of the most important things that we will do for students is help them become self-learners and self-growers, and be able to continue to be successful well beyond Littleton High School. And so those are skills that we're hoping that these activities will help to develop. To reiterate a few points, and Jerry Lynn talked about several of these, but these projects are developed by teachers, classroom teachers, special educators, and they're designed to be accessible by all students. The last thing any of us want whether it's a kindergartner or a senior in high school, is for any student to be at home struggling over one of these alternative activities. We have to remember that never will they be due on a snow day. Students will always be able to come in the next day and talk to a teacher or a special educator and get support, get in-school time. Our goal is 100% of students to finish these projects, and it's our intention to make sure that they have the support to do that. So I think there's some fear about, what if my child is really struggling and I don't know how to help him or her, and that we don't want anybody to worry about that. There will be supports from faculty throughout the school year to support students just as they would with homework or other assignments. I also think it's really important that we remember that we're replacing the very last few days of school and not prime-time learning in the middle of the winter. And so when we think about that, we believe that these learning opportunities can be better for kids and more engaging for kids than it is the last week of school. And we're fortunate at Russell Street to have air conditioning, but I've been through years where we scavenge every fan at Russell Street because the poor folks at Shaker Lane can barely make it through the second floor, a day with the second floor over there. And so those are not ideal learning conditions for students. So how can we create opportunities that are cutting edge, that help us be leaders in Massachusetts, and are better than what we potentially can provide during those days? Those are the things we've been thinking about. I also think it's really important for folks to remember it's a pilot. We'll be soliciting feedback. We're not writing anything in stone. I think Dr. Clenchey has often been saying these things are green prints, and this is another one. We're going to try it. We're going to take feedback. We're going to look at how it works. We are dedicated to stakeholder buy-in. The teams at each building right now are finalizing the snow day cancellation projects, making sure they're accessible to all students, reviewing them vertically to make sure the expectations, from instance from a third grader to a fifth grader, make sense in what we're asking for students to do, that there's some continuity, that there's student choice. And as Jerry Lynn said, we have had some thoughtful and important questions from both teachers and parents. They surround around things like assignment and due dates. What if we have more or less snow days than we thought we'd have? What if my child receives special education services? We're all continuing to listen to that feedback and do everything we can to address those questions before we present on January 10th. If the pilot's approved, we have plans at each building level to be giving information to students in a cohesive way, as well as supporting questions for parents. One of the things that I think is a really important tenet of this is we really want to build student buy-in and student motivation, and a partnership in this. That it's not, we're forcing something on students. We want to create things that students are excited about, and that they have the opportunity to differentiate and go in a direction that they're excited about, and to really challenge themselves. I know that we've had some specific questions about students with disabilities, so I'll turn it over to Ms. Mira to talk about that. I'm happy to answer questions afterwards.
I'll just again reiterate much of what's been said, but staff has been working diligently to make sure that all the requirements of students' IEPs and 504 plans are met. So just reassure everyone that students with disabilities will have all the accommodations or modifications built into their assignments or projects as documented in their IEPs or 504 accommodation plans. Additionally, again, as Scott mentioned, students will have the opportunity to receive added support, utilize additional resources, or receive extra time to complete assignments when they return to school. Staff will check in with students regarding their progress and any assistance that's necessary for successful completion prior to the due dates, and as we tease those out a little bit more. And just in terms of for related services such as speech, OT, PT, occupational therapy, physical therapy. Similar to our procedure when a related service provider may be absent for an extended period of time, we will be working out plans to ensure that those services are delivered or made up in a compensatory way. And that's one of the things that we're still teasing out, how that will be delivered. So, and I'm happy to address any specific questions with families or talk about specific concerns regarding individual students. Thank you.
All right. So what do you guys need from us tonight? Anything in particular, or?
Actually,
I mean, that's fine. I mean, the question will.
Okay,
I just want to make sure
we're-
that, yeah. I want to know where the next step is
yeah,
before we start.
we're good. We just wanted to, it's been a while since we've talked about this in a formal way with the school committee and on camera. And since we sent the parent letter out and moved forward with actually creating the projects, we're just at a different spot. It's moving on as planned. There is a time crunch, as you're all aware. I mean, if we keep pushing this out beyond the end of January, one has to ask themselves, is it worth implementing this year? We really are putting a heavy emphasis on the word pilot, because as we go along and roll this out, we're gonna learn along the way. It is a continual iterative process, and I really feel, from an academic sense and a student learning sense, we're doing a creative job in making sure that we're meeting the academic needs of our students. We have a rigorous curricula in all of our subject areas, and anything that we can do to create engaging experiences for our students is a plus. And having students embark upon something that excuse me, they're passionate about, and having choice boards goes hand in hand in developing skill sets with our students that are going to create a certain amount of academic independency, which we all want to strive for. We want students to be able to research and dive into areas that they're passionate about to increase their learning. And what we're doing from K through 12 is cementing that further. We've been working on that for years, but now we have another opportunity. We have another opportunity for interdisciplinary projects as well. What we didn't want to do is have teachers just create a worksheet. I mean, that's just busy work, and quite frankly, that's certainly not what we represent as a district. So we had to take the time to become more structured. We are trying to figure out how we can take that 5-day span, and if we have 3 days, alter it a bit. But at the same time, we have to remember that teachers make curriculum adjustments all the time. If they have an assembly, if they have a field trip, teachers map their courses out for 180 days, and they alter their original plans to make sure that the material is covered. For example, if we use 3 days out of 5 days, those 2 days, depending on the school, are really opportunities for students to pick out fun projects to do. Teachers can quite simply take an assignment off what they were going to do. So it's an easy adjustment as you really think about what we're trying to do here, and we're not trying to give people extra work to do, including our teachers or our students. The premise of this whole project is to create authentic learning experiences that far surpass what we're currently doing by extending the school year. So we're pleased. We have some wrinkles to work out, which is natural, and as all of us have stated previously, we didn't want to just take something from another district and replicate it. We wanted to personalize it so it aligns with our philosophical beliefs.
And just before we jump in, so the goal then is, because we're gonna get some samples and stuff. So our goal is to get those, and a vote would be subsequent to the holiday break, correct?
Yes, the January 10th meeting.
Okay, so we're not voting tonight, so
No,
because you
no.
guys still have work to do, and we still want to see some of the,
Right.
get a little bit more input, or more direct evaluation of the material. Okay,
And
very good.
if that vote goes forward, then we would meet with our students and have parent evenings to introduce the materials and field questions.
All right.
And there would be other documents that would be created. You would see the connections on the website.
Yep.
And then you would also see the frequently asked questions resource.
All right. Questions, comments?
I just had a couple of questions. I was not at the previous meeting on that. You answered one I had was about support services for students that needed special additional supports there. I'm glad that that's being addressed. and this was maybe more just the mechanics, snow days, particular neighborhoods are also subject to power outages. And how is the, you're not printing everything and you have this little thing that pops open as soon as you make your phone call that says school's canceled. I'm not sure the mechanics of making sure, what's the access mechanism in the more severe storm type of scenarios is, in terms of making sure that
That's a great
materials
question.
available.
These materials will be circulated well before our first snow day, hopefully. I mean, I know we're implementing it later on.
Yeah.
But as soon as we're ready to go, January 28th, hopefully the start date, materials will already be circulated. So it's not as if we're going to be sending those materials out the night that we're.
Okay, that was not clear in the previous packet that I read. It looked like it was all online, or a very strong online component, and I really didn't quite.
One of the other really important tenets to remember is no one's expecting students to do work on a snow day. That's sort of one of the things we wanted to spell. That's certainly an option for students, but they're going to have weeks and months to complete these projects. So we wanted to make sure no one felt that way, that if they had to work on a snow day.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's important, hype up,
Yeah, no.
that we do acknowledge that the snow days are meant for kids to be kids and to go out and play, which is why. So if we do have a power outage, right?
Okay, that wasn't clear to me
Yeah.
from the, like I said, I didn't see the presentation. I just read through it there, so I missed that part of it.
One of our tenets when we were creating this project was that we wanted kids to be able to be kids on those days. And we wanted to make sure they had an opportunity to go out and play in the snow or slide down a hill or build a snowman. And we didn't want to take that away. We also realized that if we expected too much, we wouldn't get what we were looking to accomplish. So we had to be very methodical in our approach, make sure that the assignments were not only doable, but the time span was appropriate. And we also needed a commitment that the help would be given to students that needed the help, so that we would have a 100% success rate in terms of students completing those projects.
Yeah, no, I mean, conceptually, I have always questioned the value of those tacked-on days at the end of the year in terms of true educational value for them. So if there's a way of making it more productive for, earlier, I think the pilot is the right way to go. But then there's some things that just can't be made up, and I know that the high school students suffer on the AP level, where they need that time, and that time just disappears.
Okay.
And unfortunately, there's not much we can do about that.
Two points, if I could just reiterate, and this is something that we're reiterating for staff and administrators. The DESE guidance in slide 11 in the October 25th presentation does to some extent answer the questions that you just raised. The DESE guidance is emphasizing that these learning activities or assignments be accessible to all students, and that includes not disadvantaging any students without internet, without power, households that have children, 3, 4 children that may be sharing a single device. So we are really not, we said in the presentation and in the letter that Dr. Clincy and I penned that we are never, we're not going to disadvantage students by having the assignments due the next day or by having a digital component alone without paper accompaniments, or setting forth what the expectations are. By definition, snow days, cancellation, they're unexpected. I mean, you could listen to the weather report, but you don't know when that interruption of teaching and learning may come. We don't know it going into, December 13th, we don't know what day.
Isn't shaking the snow doll guaranteed to
So-
have snow the next
My-
day?
My point being, we have moved, we deliberately moved away from the model in some districts of having short-term assignments. like when a snow day comes, they have 1 week or 2 weeks to do the assignment for that day. Say it's a February 15th snow day, they have until March 1st. We deliberately moved away from that. We want to have student learning and skills, reading and writing across that, represent what's going on in that subject area at that grade level, at that course, and reinforce those skills. There's another aspect of DESE guidance that we're grappling with we're emphasizing with staff, and this is why they were so conscientious in developing the lesson templates. What the DESE guidance says is that the assignments are substantial assignments or projects rather than resembling traditional homework assignments. This isn't like, speed dry. It's not like you're going to have a shortened homework assignment or a shortened school day or school period and get things done and have it be superficial. So that's, right out of the DESE guidance. I don't know if before I sit down, are there any other major questions from the last presentation that I could respond?
So my concern continues to be the related services, so, and how that's gonna work, making up 5 days worth of services. I mean, I know those schedules are tight already. My other question was, I was confused in the last presentation on how you had mentioned AP wouldn't be made up. So how does that work? If a student's taking multiple AP classes, what are they required to do assignments?
They would continue to follow the course syllabus and the teacher's direction. It's not as if they're not going to do anything. It's just we could not, in fairness to the rigorous of an AP course, compartmentalize it into what we were trying to do. It needed to be separate on its own because there is no time. And those students that are taking APs, and if they have a snow day, they still need to get that material done. So they're still going to be working, but it's going to be more under the teacher's guidance in terms of what they're going to do. It's not a holiday. I mean, they have to complete the course no matter what. And you have to remember, we're looking at seniors and sometimes juniors, and they've worked hard and we've worked hard to ensure that they have that academic independence in order to do that.
Yeah. And in the case of the AP stuff, adding the extra days at the end of the year doesn't do any good because the date of the exam doesn't change.
Right.
Exactly. And as an AP teacher myself, and just to reiterate, when we have no school called, then AP teachers are in contact because we do have a very set curriculum set forth by us, by College Board, that we have to complete, and so we are in contact with. So when we say the AP courses are exempt, it's that they're exempt from this assignment because it's known that they have other set, very strict ones that they're gonna have to complete. Thank you.
I have 2 comments, kind of relative, a little bit along that line of the AP classes and the other services that, potentially, the AP thing doesn't really change because of the date, but and I'm trying not to be that cranky old man who says, well, back in my day, we never had snow days, we just got to school no matter what. But I think that, there's a societal trend to groupthink a little bit, and I think snow days, the decision to cancel snow days is a little more conservative than it used to be. And all I want to make sure is that we understand that we're not going to get even more conservative because it's no big deal. We got the blizzard bags. Just let them do that. That's not what we, as a district, that we're going to support. And I don't even need feedback on that. That's just my own comment about that. But the other thing I wanted to ask is, I know we're talking about 5 days when we get this thing swinging, and we can start it in September or October, where we're distributing the assignments and doing the education and the outreach over a much bigger window of time. Have we thought about prorating it this year down to 3 maybe, or 4, so that, I'm not suggesting it, I'm just asking if we've considered it.
We've had those discussions, and we're looking to see if we can find a way to chunk what we're doing to 3 days and still have the integrity of what we're trying to do intact. I mean, those choice boards to us are so important.
Right, you're not gonna prorate the choice board, yeah, I get what you're saying.
We want to make sure that we're not creating, we have to think of so many things, that we don't want to create an inequity in teacher workload either.
Right.
So we're looking at that, but you have to remember, if you look at when most snow days occur, it's usually February to April.
I understand, but that's somewhat contradictory, because the idea is that you wouldn't have to do them February through June, right? Conceivably, you could do them September through May. Once we get it going, right? I mean, if you're a family that says, hey, look, every third Saturday, we do one of these,
Right.
and then we're done by Thanksgiving. You could do that if
Yep.
you wanted to, right? Maybe not by Thanksgiving, but you get the idea. Maybe not every third Saturday, maybe every Saturday. You know? But, I mean, there are households that would conceivably take advantage of that, because then, you know, they can go more days of skiing or whatever it is they decide to do, instead of worrying about getting that stuff done. And in this opportunity, this tightened window, which is significantly tightened for obvious reasons, I don't think it's a problem personally. I think it's still very achievable. And I know, because of all the things we've talked about, you know, yeah, the older students are gonna have a lot of really good work to do, and it'll be a challenge academically, intellectually, but the time management part of it is doable. And then for the younger students, you know, it's not as much time.
Right.
It should be fine, you know, so, I know you guys are considering every aspect
So,
of
so just
it.
so I'm clear, Mike, are you suggesting or putting the idea forth that we only have 3, and then if we have 5 days, the kids would go those extra 2 days?
Those extra 2 days. If we thought that it would benefit the rollout of the pilot, that's all, the only reason I'm asking for it is just that we're in a shorter window. If you just wanted to consider what the pros and cons of that are and say, well, maybe that, for this year, it might be the right thing to do.
Well, we can certainly, put that on the table and take a look at it.
It's just a suggestion. I don't know that I understand if it is the right thing to do, but, because you guys are looking at it in a lot more in-depth. than
On
we are.
that same vein, are we saying that if we get 6 snow days, that they would have to make up 1?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Only-
5 is the
Alright.
maximum?
Yeah, we're not willing to go beyond the 5 days, because we feel that would be pushing the envelope for ensuring that our students have sufficient instruction with the teacher. So that was our maximum limit of tolerance, so to speak.
Well, you could envision, if you didn't care about that, you could envision a program where you prepare 12, and you just roll them out as necessary. You don't give them out at the beginning. You roll them out, you do it like Geraldine said, you've got 2 weeks from the day, and you could conceivably hard code your last day right in there and never worry about it again. But I think you're right, that's a little bit too liberal, so to speak.
And we're really trying to ensure that there's enough planning and thought process that goes into the projects. Because if you wait till the last minute or even a week before, you're not going to have the same type of quality in terms of interdisciplinary connections, because you're just taking what you're doing at the moment and you're trying to make it work. So we wanted to make sure that thought process was broad-based and long-term thinking rather than a short-term thought
I
process.
appreciate you bringing that, because that was one other thing I appreciate the way you talked about there'll be periodic check-ins throughout the window of this, and right now we're talking about that smaller window, but if we go with this moving forward, there's a big window, so that we don't put ourselves in a situation inevitable if you don't plan for it, that there are kids that are cramming through 6 assignments in 12 hours or less, right? And they're just literally throwing it across the finish line at the end. That's, again, I appreciate that you guys have put significant, I just want to make sure everybody understands that, who's listening, that that's not going to be allowed to happen, that it's going to be authentic and legitimate work. And, I mean, we do this kind of work, students do this kind of work all the time. It's just another opportunity for this type of learning. We do book reports, we do term papers, we do enterprising people, we do the science fair. These aren't that big as those ones, but they're similar to the idea of independent learning, time management, and engaging material that's challenging and rewarding, and making sure that they have the opportunity, or we hold them accountable to make sure that they take advantage of the opportunity of doing it the right way. I think is important, and you assured us that that's happening, that planning is in place, and support will be there. And then, again, talking about they're not on their own at home. They can bring it right back into the building and get feedback and get support. And I know there's plenty of teachers who will say, show it to me, and if it's not quite right, you can go do it again. No big deal. Or edit it, or however, it could be an iterative type of thing. Or when they do, they'll do that.
We really want to make sure that we set the scene for success.
Right. All right, I appreciate the update. I know there's a lot of excitement around it. Nervous energy in some respects.
Excitement and trepidation.
Yep, so appreciate that. We did, at the beginning of the meeting, mention that if there's anybody that had public input on this particular subject, more than welcome to come up and... Seeing none? All right, terrific, thank you.
At this time,
Yep.
since Mrs. Steele is here this evening, I'm not sure if everybody knows Mrs. Steele, but Beth Steele will be taking over Dr. Jamian's position as an interim curriculum director as of January 28th. During that month of January, I know we're trying to get the alternative learning structured time project off and ready to go. So Jerry Lynn will be coming in and helping out, and we're going to free up Beth when we need her to help out. But we're all super excited to have Beth on board, and Beth has spent so much time working on this project and has already spent a lot of time with Dr. Jamie and starting to integrate into the position and learning all the different aspects of the position. That position may seem simple, but it has many, many different components to it. And it's, we say director of curriculum, but there's a lot more that goes on beyond the director of curriculum. So welcome, Beth, in an official manner, and we're looking forward to working with you.
Thank you very much.
All right, now a big one. MCAS results presentation from the spring 2018 exam.
My first MCAS presentation was in 1999.
And this is going to be your last.
Never say never.
There's some aspects of statewide, it being the last. Let me provide a little bit of introduction to the report itself. The state testing program, MCAS, assesses what students need to know and be able to do as defined by the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks. The content and skills in our state frameworks set the bar high for academic performance. And the goal of MCAS is to both measure the performance of students against state standard and grade level competencies, and to provide useful feedback that can improve teaching and learning. In Littleton, we embrace both aspects of this dual goal and are committed to providing information on MCAS to all stakeholders who share responsibility for advancing what our students know and are able to do. It is from the perspective of commitment to rigorous measures of academic performance that we should view the performance of Littleton students. I want to point out, I want to make one point about the percentages that you see in this presentation, and it's important to bear in mind. The number of students whose assessment results are included in MCAS differs for districts and for schools. The groups are not coterminous. This distinction is important with respect to the percentages charted in this presentation. District reports include all students who took the MCAS test, while enrolled within Littleton Public Schools, regardless of when they enrolled, and students in out-of-district placements. School reports include only those students enrolled in the school on or before October 1st who took the MCAS in that very same school. So we are pleased to present the report on 2018 MCAS. It is a collaborative review of analysis of student performance data. It is a shared responsibility and priority, and these are involves these groups. Major themes and topics in the presentation, continuing to further an understanding of the next generation MCAS. This is an updated version of a legacy MCAS given for the first time last year. In 4 grades 3 through 8 in ELA and math, and eventually all MCAS tests will be next generation. We do compare, and we're able to compare in 2018 a little bit more than 2017, district and level and statewide results, and we evaluated on the individual student, school, and district performance according, and I want to emphasize, according to grade level curriculum framework standards. The analysis of MCAS involve an ongoing review of individual student performance data and performance data in the aggregate. This slide is a version of a slide that I presented last year. It's from the state, and it provides key information about the next generation MCAS. The most important thing about the updating of the nearly 20-year-old legacy MCAS assessment is that it follows and reflects revisions in the curriculum frameworks, and those revisions in the curriculum frameworks set forth more rigorous standards for college and career readiness. The focus on critical thinking abilities involved writing and response to text at all grades. Before, MCAS had composition only in grades 4, 7, and 10, and you will see in the item analyses and the emphasis on department level that analysis of text. I keep on emphasizing throughout this portion of the presentation when I talk about grade level performance, readiness here in the standard setting for the curriculum frameworks and the MCAS standards, readiness for the next grade level translates that students ultimately will be ready for post-secondary education and or training. An emphasis, the next generation MCAS moved to computer-based testing. I want to point out one thing about the grades 5 and 8 science test. In 2018, that's this spring, grades 5 and grade 8, they took the science test on the computer. But the science test was considered a legacy science test because the test design and items followed the old legacy format. It will be revamped this coming year. In the spring of 2019, all grades 3 through 8 and grade 10, ELA and math will be computer-based. Okay. The wording for the achievement levels are something to pay attention to, including the coloring of the fonts. The new description of the next generation student achievement levels emphasize 2 main points. One, again, the notion of readiness for the next grade level work, and 2, the need for academic assistance. And you see that is addressed in the red, which is established through a homeschool partnership. Under partially meeting expectations, which is a broad band, right before students meet, it's the school could consider whether the student needs additional academic assistance. And not meeting expectations, those students are more at risk, and here those are more, they're called for more determining what are coordinated approach to meeting students' needs. MCAS, similarly, MCAS scaled scores set forth in the next generation MCAS are different than the legacy. I want to emphasize that the scaled score is the standard achievement indicator, and we will be looking at that consistently, scaled scores, when we report district results and when there's comparison to state reports, and those scaled scores, as we move forward with the next generation MCAS, may have more meaning than they do now in the initial administrations of the next generation MCAS. This slide shows the report for parents. Again, right, up top center, your child's score is the standard achievement indicator, the average scaled score. That really is an important summary statistic. A lot of times numbers in education may not convey meaning, but we do emphasize what the scaled score is, and it's used to compute student growth percentiles. Parents, again, the MCAS reflects the learning standards in the frameworks, and it's how students set forth their understanding. And so it is by different strands and types of question. For example, this is different aspects of mathematics that you see here. And so the item descriptors are provided for the types of questions on a mathematics test. Okay. What's going to happen this spring? A major change is grade 10 ELA and mathematics. You will see when the academic departments, ELA and math, talk about their preparations and their item analysis. Front and center is preparing students to take the grade 10 MCAS, computer-based. And in it may be slides that Dr. Harrington addresses, but I prepared them. You will see, and this is something that the school committee in the past asked for, the cohort analysis. Initially, we prepared bar graphs, but then we copied the Edwin Analytics cohort history slides. And they're in the presentation today on the cohort history of the grade 10 MCAS. And you see students who were in the district who took the test from grade 3 MCAS through grade 10. That is the last time in the state through the website that type of cohort slide is going to be available, because it is the last time the legacy test is going to be taken. And it's important. Dr. Harrington may talk about it. It's an important slide. And it's a set of important slides. And as the next generation MCAS moves forward, they'll be able to have a different type of cohort analysis, but you cannot, it's apples and oranges. You cannot have a cohort history for the next generation MCAS versus the legacy MCAS. And I wanted to make that point in the context of what's coming next. And then we see the transition plan for MCAS in science and technology. And I had said earlier that the MCAS reflects and follows revisions in the frameworks. That goes for the frameworks in science and technology. There's changes looming at the high school level for the science and technology and engineering. At this point, there are science tests in 4 different domains of science: biology, chemistry, introductory physics, technology, engineering. Littleton High School administers the biology test. The state will be introducing a biology test and introductory physics test that have overlapping standards from the two different frameworks, 2001, 2006, and 2016 state test. And they plan to phase out the chemistry and technology tests, and then develop a next generation biology and introductory physics test. So Littleton High School students, in all probability, will be taking a next generation computer-based biology test that reflects the 2016 curriculum frameworks. I put in 3 slides from the state that provide an overall context for statewide results. The percentage of students, it does hover around 500, the average scaled score. The percent of students scoring meeting expectations or higher range from 54% at grade 5 to a low of 46% at grade 7. There was not a lot of change at the state level in the scaled scores from 2017 to 2018. Next slide. Similarly, that was the same for mathematics, with a range from a high of 50% at grade 3 to a low of 46 at grades 5 and 7. This is the legacy MCAS. This is an example of how.
I'm sorry for the interruption, but I think it would be worthwhile just making a comment about how the next generation MCAS is mirrored after NAEP. And I sent an article out to the school committee in regard to that. And in essence, what the article was saying, the people that actually sit on the NAEP committee, that it was questionable whether or not the NAEP benchmark should be transferred into a standard-based test, which we've done in Massachusetts. So I'm going to have Jerry finish.
No, go ahead.
What the expectations when the next generation MCAS was developed was that half of the students would pass or meet expectations, and half of the students would not. So I think that we really need to have that context as we move forward. Obviously, the state's point of view is that through time, the next generation MCAS will produce the same results as the old MCAS did. And that's their theory, so to speak, and hopefully that will be the case as we move forward.
The next slide shows changes in the grade 10 MCAS and grade 10 MCAS results. It's from 2007 to 2018. I tried to get one from the initial administration, the years before 2007, and so the 20 year, and things changed at grade 10 over the course of that generation, and from my perspective, it was not reductionist in teaching to the test. If the test reflects expectations about what students should know and be able to do, there was an advancement, in students' academic performance when the local classroom expectations for assessment and curriculum mirrors the expectations in the large-scale MCAS assessment. At the state level, 90% of students achieve proficiency on ELA, but that's achieving proficiency. You'll hear about LHS performance going beyond proficiency and the number of students that are in scoring in the advanced. Grade 5 and 8, science legacy. This is the next. I wanted to show you, it's a difficult test. And our administrators and coordinators have talked about the difficulty in reviewing different domains of science when they spiral and the test is given once in the 5th grade and then once again in the 8th grade. Our district has chosen with our FOSS program an integrative approach, looking at every domain every year. And we have we have been very pleased with the student achievement data resulting from that. When you go to the next set of slides, we set forth, we could not do that, I mean, it's district to state comparisons this year. And in ELA, at all grade levels 3 through 8, LPS students meeting or exceeding expectations is above state averages. We see turning to the next slide, at mathematics for the next generation, it really is above the state level, whereas grade 4 is hovering right around the state level. The next slide shows the differences in the legacy, the comparison district to state and the legacy, and you see the achievement levels are different. We're looking at students achieving proficiency. That's the important marker. And again, Littleton High School, 9 out of 10 students achieve proficiency in our 2 major academic subjects, ELA and math. The next slide shows students at each achievement level, and the headings show the achievement level for next generation MCAS. We'll go forward. In mathematics, and this is the comparison from one year to another. This is grade level. They are not the same. They are not the same cohort of students. The value of grade level comparisons from one year to another, the annual comparisons, the charts are on the DESC website. If you look up in the resources, I listed for parents where to go for more information. For educators, it's described at each of our school sites as well on the DESC website. And what's emphasized is grade level performance, and from a teaching curriculum instructional assessment point of view, it's taking a look at grade level performance in order to modify either curricular or assessment practice. Okay, we'll go forward. And I want to emphasize a few things in these slides. These overviews were developed with the grades 6 through 12 curriculum coordinators who facilitate and lead those detailed analyses in each and spend a lot of time in detail going over individual, subgroup, and aggregate performance. In ELA and math, the review of MCAS results by standard for curriculum alignment and revision of curriculum sequencing is really the explanation of what we do when we compare, make these annual comparisons in grade level MCAS. And you see in all of the academic areas, the coordinators and teachers are working on familiarizing students with the revised platform and content. Our principals are going to present the MCAS results and analysis in each of their schools. I would just say one thing in parting about the last slide. In terms of, in the presentation, you don't have to go to it. The DESC has made a significant effort to revamp their resources for parents and make them more readable and understandable, and so I have some of those sites listed. And it's important to note that under the school and district profiles, the tab for assessment will show the annual comparisons and the performance by achievement level and the school and district levels. If you have questions for me, I'd be happy to answer before we go into the school level reports.
Yeah. All right. Let me see here. I tried to jot chart numbers down as we go. So let's start at chart 3.
Slide 3?
Yeah, this is more of a philosophical comment, not directed at you personally.
Hey, you gotta take your shots while you got it.
Yeah, no, when it says, next grade level got that career or college ready, I just philosophically have a problem that 10th grade math is not ready for college. You know.
Well, so did the state.
Yeah.
I mean, so did the state. I mean, the point, I'm not
Yeah, no,
disagreeing at all.
and it just strikes me, given the state also has a 4-year math requirement for all high school students, you know, the concept of them instituting this test at the 10th grade level is just inconsistent.
Well, the point of college and career readiness that I want to emphasize, and it's not necessarily disagreeing with what you're saying, but I do think it reinforces one aspect of your take on it, and this is what Dr. Clenchey and I emphasized last year when there was a disconnect between student results on the old legacy MCAS and what happened last year. There were so many more percentages of students scoring proficient on MCAS and less than scoring, meeting expectations. And what we saw across the state and what was the shared opinion is that students may be scoring proficient on MCAS. And when they finish grade 10, when they finish grade 11, when they finish grade 12, they went into college and you needed remedial math and remedial ELA. And so the added rigor is intended for this readiness for grade level. The increased rigor is to translate that when they get out of high school in grade 12, they are ready for college academic work. That's how I could answer it.
You can answer it that way, I'm sure.
But I do think that is a portion, addresses a portion of your frustration with the lack of rigor. And there is a grade 10 test. It's not a grade 12 test. Those tests may be SAT. There are other indicators of what students do. It is not a.
And I get that from an educator's perspective, but as a parent, you read that, it says you pass the MCAS, you are college or career ready. And that's not what it means. By the standard that they state. It's a disconnect, on it. And it's just not realistic in terms of you are on a trajectory to be college or career ready.
Yes.
No, that's not what it says.
No, you're right,
Yeah,
Darryl.
I appreciate what.
Yeah,
I
and it's not,
understand what you're saying.
you're just the focus because you're the curriculum director and
That's
at the
right.
podium.
No, I understand that. I do think it's less problematic
Yeah.
than having a competency determination that you have achieved proficiency in a state that talked about high standards, and in that very same state, 1/3 of all high school graduates needed remedial training.
Anyway, that was, like I said, it's more of a philosophical one there. And the next one I wanted to catch was on chart, I think I could use chart 11 for it. And that ties in with the phrases, I think it was on the earlier charts, about partially meeting expectations. And I'm really honing in on this statement of partially meeting expectations. The school, in consultation with the student's parent guardian, shall consider whether a student needs additional academics. As I look at the state level scores, and I think it's actually reflected in the district level ones, it's clear almost 50% of the students fall in that category of what is the state doing, and then I have to turn around, what are we doing in terms of reaching out to almost half of our student population and parent population about what does their student need to do to.
In order to meet the grade level standards, yes.
Right.
Well, thank goodness, we have map testing in our district that gives us a pretty good indication of where our students are in terms of academic process and standard acquisition, which serves as a check and balance between the MCAS administration and the reality of an adaptive test. So I hear what you're saying, Darrell, but I'm going to go back to the original comment I made about the design of the next generation MCAS. I guess the basic question that needs to be asked, why would you design a test that's going to have 50% of your students pass and 50% fail? I mean, I think there's a benchmark issue, and I'm all for rigor and making sure that we give our students an opportunity to grow as much as they can.
I actually agree with you, because.
Well, that's nice.
Well, no, because I mean, I looked at it, and I'm not surprised that all the numbers are at 500, because by design, a scaled score is gonna bring it to 500, plus or minus whatever averaging function that they have is. My point is back to my 10th grade comment, it sets the expectation based on these words that half our parents should you should be out doing some kind of outreach to them about what's necessary to adjust their students' performance and learning environment. And that, I don't think, is realistic, because by design, the test is designed to put half the students there, whether or not that is reflective of their grade level competency.
A legitimate outreach effort to half your population, the resources required to do that beyond what we already have is mind-boggling.
But I bring it up is this is what the material's coming out, and what is my response when parents come to me and go, I didn't get outreach, my student was in this category, state says you're supposed to be reaching out to me. I'm just concerned about the language that's in here and what type of expectation that sets. And then us saying it's not realistic because the state's got it wrong. I agree with you, but that's not what we're being presented here.
No, and you know, I guess that's part of the challenge. Again, the philosophical approach that the state is taking is with the enhanced expectations, our teachers will continue to develop instructional strategies and assessment strategies that are going to move our students forward. So in 10 years, it's going to look very similar to the previous MCAS exam. Well, that's a pretty stretched statement, to say the least, because if you look at NAEP results over time, that's never happened. So I agree 100% with you. And as an educational leader, it's a little frustrating to me that we look at our student performance on the old MCAS. We were doing really well. And so they've created a new benchmark, and from an academic lens and a brain-based learning lens, one has to ask themselves, are students actually cognitively ready to excel with some of those concepts? I mean, we know that students learn at different paces, and if we look at individuals and compare individuals to fingerprints, they have different fingerprints, which translates that every child is different and learns differently, but yet they've created this set of expectations.
But I guess where I'm going is this is the district's presentation to your school committee. What should our parents be expecting? Is kind of what I would like to make sure that we're clear of.
You're bringing up good points.
Yeah, no, you really are. We will continue to do our best in making sure that all students continue to grow in these areas, but I would also ask that our parents look at the MAP results. And I think the greater emphasis on our MAP testing gives students a more realistic picture of where their students are in terms of achievement relative to a larger sample as well. I mean, those tests are adaptive tests. They're designed to give us a good indication of where that student is, irregardless of the grade that they're in. So it's a much more powerful test. It also allows us to make adjustments as our students are in that current grade. Or as I look at an MCAS exam, when do we get the results? Kids are already in the next grade.
But a parent that gets their scores and then has those concerns, what's their
Yeah,
approach
and-
back into
and-
the school system to make sure that what you know,
Yeah.
the access to the map data or their individualized
Right.
pieces there, so that.
What seems, I would go back to it's sort of lost in the verbs should consider versus should determine. The difference in the verbs in the red ink between partially.
You can debate the technicalities of the language.
No,
with a
no,
parent, but
I
I'm just saying
actually
it-
think, no, I don't mean to debate the technicalities.
Okay.
What I mean to say, for us to make explicit, is that for a student, and different students are at different levels, who are partially meeting expectations, the consideration of what to do and what to offer, it may be within the regular classroom, an emphasis on different skill sets, an emphasis on different problem sets. The win block in math or reading at Russell Street or the middle school, it may be a little bit of pull-out, or going to the reading lab or the math lab at the middle school. It may be within the context of a regular ed classrooms and everyday problem set. It also may involve a student staying after school and working on a particular, worksheet.
But everything you're citing there is the stuff we do every day.
Exactly.
That's what I'm saying.
Just not relative to this specific exam,
Exactly.
in this new exam, so I appreciate that, and I think that's, Daryl knows it was a kind of almost a rhetorical question, that's the answer we always expect. But the question is in the context of the message being portrayed by
The state.
the state and the way they are asking or requiring us to present the data is putting us in a potentially untenable situation.
Fair.
Yep.
Unless we're just gonna spew platitudes
Right.
about
And-
this, and we're just gonna go do the work every day like we do, like I know you guys do.
No, and perhaps, like I said, I want to make sure parents understand the expectation, and it's also an opportunity for us to be very clear about that spectrum of services from, the 504 IEPs, the DCAP, get the right,
Decaf.
right,
Yes.
pieces
Yes.
there on
Yes,
it, because,
standards-based report card, emphasizing certain standards, emphasizing certain
in
aspects
terms of
of
how we're
it.
holistically looking at this is important, because like I said, this wording by itself in this piece here sets a wrong expectation.
And it's problematic too, because I'll circle back to the comments Kelly made about, the model of this exam mirrors something else where it's 50-50, and that's the idea. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that if that's what you're trying to do. But the MCAS was designed as an absolute measure, right? The goal was to get to 100%, and we did year after year after year. On that, whatever the value of that absolute measure is, you can debate. But the point it wasn't designed to see how smart anybody was. It was designed to get to this bar, get over the bar, and 100% of the kids were. It's an absolute measure. And now we're starting to debate more of a relative measure, which again has a lot of merit. But that's not what the MCAS is designed to be doing. And now I'm concerned that there are conflicting messages and conflicting goals that go beyond what it was 20 years ago, 19 years ago, portrayed to represent.
Oh, you're.
And we just have to sit here and do it because we're being told to do it. Ostensibly, the MCAS 2.0 was to make it better. Well, it's not, it may or may not be better, but it's certainly different. And nobody talked about that it was gonna be different from the original goal of an absolute measure that the goal was to get 100% of. So it's gonna be interesting to see how it plays out.
It really will, and to not acknowledge cognitive limitations in terms of age is wrong. I mean, if we take a cohort of grade 5 students and teach them a course in calculus, there'll be a few, but most of them are not cognitively ready for those concepts. And in my opinion, there wasn't enough thought put into this process. And I'm going to piggyback on the fact that our stress levels with students across our nation have skyrocketed. And what is this going to do in terms of reversing all of the things that we're trying to do within our school districts to help students cope with stress? Because we're sending a very different, and parents, we're sending, we have different data to look at, which shows our students doing very well, but we also have this new data that is very different. And any concerned parent, any concerned student will be looking at this and saying, well, there's a mismatch. So I hear what you're saying 100%. To me, it's frustrating, and in an era where people are starting to question the merit of standardized testing, I just don't know why they would throw this upon us, to be honest with you.
And philosophically, I would just say that deciding what a child's academic assistance needs are based on one test is not what we want to be doing as a district.
No way. It can be harmful to our overall goals and achievement.
And they haven't even finished the curriculum when they write this test. I mean, it's just, it's filled with what ifs.
I have one more, then I'll stop. So the last one, and again, sorry, because you're just standing at the podium, is has the state reconciled the science track and what grades in high school physics and the other one are
Science and technology.
Science and technology are
introductory.
typically taught, because physics isn't typically taught until 11th, 12th, depending on
It depends
how
on,
you-
it depends on their
it's in your-
school and their sequence.
Right.
Up until this year, and including this year, the tests could be administered grade 9 or grade 10 in any of those 4 domains. Littleton High School issued, if I'm understanding your question correctly, Littleton High School administered the biology MCAS.
So I'd have to go back through, but.
Going forward, in the move to computer-based testing and the upgrade to reflect the new curriculum frameworks exclusively, not that hybrid between the old 2001, 2006, the state is going to concentrate on biology and introductory physics for computer-based tests that reflect the 2016 science and technology frameworks, if I understand your question.
So part of it is I mean, I can look at how my kids went through, typically biology, freshman, chemistry, typically sophomore, physics, usually not, almost exclusively not until junior or senior year. Engineering, we usually don't get till junior or senior year, just because of the number of classes that are required to take.
Right.
So the concept of now, we're gonna drop something in order to do physics in freshman year in order to make it so that they could get to a 10th grade
No.
test.
No.
And that's what I'm trying to understand. What's the overall scheduling plan for some of these things here? Because it,
They have a choice. Schools will have a choice based on what curriculum they teach in the 9th grade. So, for example, we teach biology in the 9th grade, but there are other school districts that, it was a physics first movement that was popular several years ago, and it's still making its way around, and there's been advocacy for that even within Littleton, from certain individuals who talked to me about placing physics, more of a, used to be physical science, so it's an introductory physics, it was sort of a watered down physics compared to what we offer in the junior, senior year. And that's, I'd have to look at the test, I don't want to be judgmental of it.
Then I start really having problems with the words that were just coming out. is
Introductory physics. Yeah.
Watered down, bring it up, because a lot of the physics require the math that you need from 9th and 10th grade.
I'd have to look, yeah, but the physical science, there was debate.
But anyway,
on science.
it just gives me pause in terms of what exactly is gonna be happening with those tracks there and the implications it would be in terms of how we have to now sequence students through our course.
We'll be okay,
course
no, we'll be
levels.
okay, because it's, our plan for the immediate future. We'll do a program review of science probably in the near future. I think that's going to be, that is a recommendation for us in our school improvement program, plan to look at program reviews in various departments. And one of the first ones I talked about with the superintendent actually just last spring was a science program review. We're due for that. We'll look at what other competitive schools, and, you know, comparable to us, what their sequence is for science curriculum and what we should offer. But right now, our plan is to focus on the biology MCAS, as we have in the past.
Anyway, it strikes, you know, since I have a
So
pretty
if the
strong STEM
sequence, I
background.
think one short answer, tell me if you agree.
Yeah.
One short answer would be, given the changes on the state level for science, it would be to continue with biology in the 9th grade, but that biology test would be the different test, and it would be computer-based, different items that reflect the 2016 frameworks. That would be the difference.
And our teachers are preparing for that.
Yeah, evolution of the biology test, get it,
That's what I mean.
it's the addition of the other sciences in there.
No,
That,
no, it's not addition. No, I'm sorry if I said
Available.
it forth that way. It's an option of, right now, the tests in the science tests in the 9th grade are different domains. Littleton has always chosen biology.
Correct. It's not both.
All right, so what was confusing is the phrase on chart 9 then. In June 2019, all.
Statewide, my apologies, statewide, all 4 of those tests are available, but high schools choose which test.
That part's not clear
administer.
there. I read it that
Yes.
all 4 of those
My
exams.
apologies.
It's a
will be-
choice.
It's a
will be
choice.
For each school.
administered.
It's a choice.
In fact, there are big high schools that offer physics and biology, or introductory physics and biology, or they have tech and engineering, and they may have, within a large department,
So if you could do
depending on
something
what
to this
course the
chart.
the student's enrolled in, will
Widely
take that test.
distributed, because it implies that we will be administering
Yeah,
all
well-
4 exams
Yeah,
to
we'll make
our
it-
to our students.
We'll make
That's
a
it, that's
change
it, that's it.
before it goes on.
Thank
We'll
you.
we'll change it and resubmit it to our website.
Okay, thank you.
I guess just another comment, Darrell, I've been kind of processing what you're saying. And as we embark upon this journey that we really have no say in, it's imperative that we continue to look at that data that we can access from our graduates and see how well they're doing
Yeah.
in their colleges and universities. And to me, that's what it's all about. We need to make sure that we don't get bogged down in one instrument, and really look at what matters here. And what really matters is, are our students being successful as they go on to post-secondary education? Do they have the skills to adjust and adapt, learn and unlearn, etc.? And when we look at those results, we see very positive things happening. And we all know there are other factors, but I think that in itself is something that we probably need to start emphasizing more. Even bringing students back and talking to us if they're comfortable in terms of how was your first year of college, how was your third year, etc. And we do have students that write us notes, and those are real success stories. And it's just important that we make sure that we use a broad set of data when we're assessing how well we're doing with students. So.
Yeah, but part of it is trying to understand what expectations this is setting, and then, like I said, I have my own experience of my own children going through the district and them being prepared, and then, like I said, if we start needing to pull things back and do them sooner, it's like, well, I was very pleased with how prepared my daughters were from after physics, after chemistry, after biology. There, but if you're trying to accelerate those in order to hit 10th grade target test date, I don't see how you're going to do it.
No.
No, we're not.
And it's going to set a wrong expectation there.
And you have to question the merit of even doing it.
Right, exactly. You can't cram 4 years of science into the first year and a
No,
half of a
And as
high
you said,
school
the
student.
foundational elements for the study of those sciences would not be addressed.
Right. So, anyway, I'll stop.
So we will make a change. I appreciate what you said, and, you know, you want to summarize changes, and there were a lot of changes in the state level in 2019 in terms of the content and the transition plan for MCAS science. And I appreciate, you know, your points, and we will revise the slide.
Piggybacking on that a little bit, I just think it would be important to get out in front of that with parents and let them know that the changes in the testing and what that means, and that we do our own internal assessments, and based on our own internal assessments and teacher feedback and those things, that's what determines, you know, whether students need extra help
Academic support.
yeah.
The expectations, and that's what you said, that we do all the time.
Right.
In terms of taking a look at how the classroom expectations for assessment mirror the expectations for the large-scale assessment.
Yeah, I just think we need to be clear with parents on that, because like Daryl said, they're gonna get this, you know, report at home, and they're gonna look at it and go, what do you mean? What do you mean my kid needs extra help? You know, what happened?
This is the second year. This is the second administration of this exam. So we've already had 1 year with our community. And I think it went really smooth, to be honest with you, in terms of what we're currently doing. It doesn't mean that we don't think of other ways to address it, but I'm going to reiterate the importance of creating an opportunity to incorporate our map testing results into the discussion, because I think that data is far more valuable.
And I think, as a parent, the type of conversations that you have about what goes on in classrooms, you know, you talk about the good old, you know, old time. You know, parents went in and they saw a report card that had a letter A, B, C. I mean, now we have from Shaker Lane to Russell Street to the middle, we have standards-based report cards. So the educational discussion about how your student is doing on these learning standards or particular learning standards, the standards are out there. Students know what they are, parents know what they are. So part of my answer to both of you about what we're doing in terms of outreach to parent is reinforcing standards-based language. And we're doing that too in the snow day cancellation pilot. The standards are right there, so we reinforce what students are expected to know and be able to do. I see that as an essential part of outreach to students and parents.
My other thing was just a curiosity question. Have you seen any difference in how students perform from paper to the computer?
I think the principals will be talking about that.
Okay.
They did last year, and they continue to.
Thank you.
We've already had a very good, robust discussion. No, and it was great. And all I want to say is that, you know, we're going to hear from the principals, but I think a lot of what we have concerns about, I think we've hashed out already.
Yeah.
You know, I think that we've identified some significant philosophical issues that we as a committee have with this implementation. And I do want to hear what the principals have to say, but I personally am not going to get too caught up in the weeds of building by building relative to what we've already talked about, so.
Yeah, no, I mean, I went through the packet, and most of them really centered on this upfront material here.
For it. So, and with that, let's go.
Good evening again. A couple quick things before I dive into the data. As I was preparing my presentations tonight, for any of you that are sports fans and think about major league pitchers who pitch a certain number of games or play a certain number of playoff games, I was regretting not having written into my contract a clause that triggered some sort of bonus if I presented twice at a school committee. So, here I am again.
Careful, that's a double-edged sword.
That is.
And to Superintendent Clinchey's point, I also wanted to share a quick story. My daughter is a senior at Salem High School in New Hampshire, and her mother and she have been visiting colleges, and they were at both Plymouth State and Keene State in the last 2 weeks to 3 weeks, and both times my wife Tara texted me and said, I don't know what you guys are doing down there, but there was this small panel of student leaders at Plymouth, there's a small panel of student leaders at Keene, and on both of them there was an extremely talented student leader academically and or athletically who said, hi, I'm so-and-so from Littleton, Massachusetts. And so they're very successful young women up there at both of those schools who are representing us well to prospective students. So I thought that was great. Steve, this is just an overview. You can bump by that. I'm pleased on behalf of the staff, the teachers, and teaching assistants and students at Russell Street to be able to come tonight and put up some slides with a lot of green numbers on them. You'll notice we're looking there at percentages of students who are either meeting or exceeding in the meeting or exceeding categories on MCAS versus the state. And those are percentage points above. So if it's green, it's percentage points above. You'll notice grade 3 solidly above the state, grade 4 ELA solidly above the state, student growth solidly above the state. The state student growth percentile is about 50, give or take a couple percentage points in every test. So that means in that case the growth percentile for 4th grade in ELA was 58.8. If you look at math, the growth percentile is 52.3, slightly below the state in achievement in math. Grade 5 ELA and grade 5 math, you'll notice achievement scores continue to exceed the state. As we grow there, grades 3, 4, and 5, you'll notice the gaps grow a little bit more. The growth scores in grade 5 even and slightly below. The state calls 40% student growth moderate growth, and so that again would be a 46% student growth percentile for grade 5 ELA. And grade 5 science, again, you see an excellent number there. We're overall very pleased with our achievement and growth scores. One of the highlights from last year, actually not a highlight, but one of the things we talked about a lot last year was an unusual performance by our grade 3 students. There was some concern about what that meant and what the pattern would look like. And so I'll talk a little bit tonight. You'll look there that in ELA, this year's, they're currently 4th graders now, but 21 percentage points above the cohort before them in ELA and 16 percentage points above the cohort before them in math. The state also improved, so you see over on the right that last year those numbers were -7 and -4, how we related to the state, and this year +5 and +1. So pleased to report that we had significant improvement for grade 3, and also if you look at those same students up there in grade 4, their growth percentiles of 58.8 and 52.3 show strong growth coming out of that unusual 3rd grade year. So we were pleased to see that. Well, those numbers are a little hard to read on the screen, I apologize. What you'll see there is how in subgroups, how students at Russell Street compare to the state. Again, percentile of students meeting or exceeding expectations. The first column is students with disabilities. You'll notice solidly green all the way down, all the way through all 3 grades, and both tests solidly beating the state there. You jump to economically disadvantaged, and you see some spots there that raise an eyebrow. One of the things I would draw our attention to here is the state requires 20 students to be a subgroup school-wide, but if you look, that next column is the number of students that at each grade that fall into those categories. So those are very, very small groups of students for whom we're gathering percentages. So I put the high need subgroup next. What that high need subgroup is any student, I put the definition at the bottom, non-duplicated, any student with disabilities subgroup, the economically disadvantaged subgroup, or the ELL or former ELL subgroup. And so again, we can still see we're doing solidly well. Those 2 red scores are grade 3 scores, which are current 4th graders. I can't, because of the number of students we're talking about there, I can't talk too specifically except to say we're on that. We're as a team working with students, and we're aware that there is some need there and that we're working on that. So I don't want to go into too much detail because that's such a small group, but overall, we were pleased in the aggregate, and overall, we were pleased in the subgroups, and we're certainly working with those current grade 4 students to keep them moving. We'll jump to next steps. You'll see several things here that, one of the messages, I guess I forgot to say at the beginning, one of the things I always say when I step up here is, I really believe MCAS is a moment in time snapshot of a student. It's only one piece of data, frankly, not as important as many of the pieces of data that I think we get academically and socially and emotionally at the elementary level. So I tend to try to stay pretty balanced, whether we have some areas that are really concerning or some areas that are really amazing. I try to stay pretty balanced and look at, we talk every year, we don't have that many students, the cohorts are small. We try to grow and we try to not be reactive and do too many things to chase a target. So you'll notice that there's some continues on here. We've had a multi-year effort at Russell Street School to focus on standards-based instruction and assessment, including student ownership of learning and putting learning targets up for students in student language, ICANN statements. We really want to make sure we take a look, and we are taking a look at the K-5 vertical alignment. Our teachers have had one of those early release days and we'll have another. And you'll notice I've talked for a couple of years about continuing to look at rigor, not only exposing students to high complexity literature, but students who may not be at grade level yet to make sure they're also exposed to their grade level material with support. And we're looking to continue to expand mathematical thinking and mathematical vocabulary. A few of the things that we are doing that are a little bit newer is, and it's not really new at Russell Street. I've talked about social emotional learning since the first year I was here, but as a district, we're pushing forward pretty firmly on social emotional learning, and you'll notice that there's several of those things in here. We don't view those things as separate, social emotional learning and academic success. Those things go together and support one another. So you'll notice that we are working on explicit teaching and learning around social and emotional skills. I noted that up there. That's not only in taking a look at a specific social skills program in addition to our responsive classroom approach that may align closely with what's happening at Shaker Lane, but also looking at social and emotional learning targets and making sure teachers and students understand the skills that are necessary. We talk a lot about the standards and the academic pieces, and I've always been one to say we don't want to forget about the skills piece. You can have all the content you want. We need to give kids skills, communication skills, self-management skills, self-awareness skills. You can have all the content you want. If you can't work with other people, that's not what employers are looking for. So that's super important. We've redesigned our intervention block. It's called WIN now. You'll remember I've talked about an RTI model and a WIN model. We now have one intervention block. It's 45 minutes long in each grade level. WIN stands for what I need. I feel like we're a little bit out on the cutting edge with this model. Our students are all doing something that benefit them at that time, including we've woven in some social and emotional support for some students for whom maybe that's what they need most versus some academic support during that time. So we're continuing to flesh it out. This is the first block. This is the first sort of intervention window. We're just halfway through it. So we just had our progress monitoring meetings, but overall the feedback has been strong. We're continuing to utilize this answer protocol for extended writing tasks. You'll continue to see writing as an area that our students continue to need to grow in. They have made progress. They need to continue to make progress. We have a designated writing block. There's a word missing there in that second to last bullet in all classrooms, and we're continuing with that. And we also expanded our Dreambox Math adaptive online program to all students. It was very successful with our Title I students. We're very thankful to have district support to offer that to all students, K-5. And finally, goal setting. We've been talking a lot about goal setting at Russell Street School, not only academic goal setting or goal setting for the MAP assessment and RIT scores and that type of thing, but social and emotional goal setting. We're trying to work with students around, what kind of skills are you working on? Have you been having challenges at recess? What can we try today? Let's assess at the end of the week, how did your goal go? And so we're trying to include students in their learning, build understanding, give ownership to students, and help them grow those skills. So goal setting has been sort of a common theme that we've talked about a lot. We are in year 2 of a 3-year implementation plan for the next generation MCAS. This year, 3rd grade We'll pick up the online assessment. Fourth grade started 2 years ago, fifth grade last year. So as of this year, we will be fully online. To your question about online versus paper, our teachers would report to you that they thought that their students wrote far less, as you might expect, using a computer. And some struggled with things like the touchpad, so we've made some accommodations in cases to make mice available and those types of things. Interestingly, their scores did not reflect that. So I think what the state said is they tried to make sure that using a computer didn't disadvantage students. So I don't know exactly how they did that when they were assessing, but we didn't see, for instance, the first year fourth grade did it. Wow, they really were much lower because they, could we attribute that to the technology? So we haven't seen that in the scores, but it is a concern for our staff that kids are still learning those skills. They feel like they could write a lot more than they might if they were on a Chromebook. So those are certainly things we talk a lot about, and that we're working hard to get kids the technology skills they need to have assessments. The MAP assessment is also online, to get them comfortable taking assessments online. But overall score-wise, we haven't seen it be a significant concern. And again, we've had a significant rollover at Russell Street School of retirements and fantastic new teachers coming in, but that also means, we're not one of these schools that's had the same 6 people teaching at the same grade for, 25 years, and they're all dialed into exactly what their grade does. So we want to remember that everybody has a learning curve. But overall, extremely proud of the work that the students and teachers are doing at Russell Street. In fact, we had sparkling apple juice at our MCAS analysis meetings for each grade level to recognize the hard work. Third grade was, as you might imagine, very focused last year to try to not repeat, have their students do much better than they did last year. And so it was a big relief for them to see their scores. So we're really proud of the work that they did. And I'm always proud to come and talk about our students. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
I saw him writing over there.
I'm going to use chart 15, if you wouldn't mind flipping back to that one, just because of the data, the way it's presented
Yeah.
here. And actually, you already touched upon it. So last year, we talked about grade 3, and then here, I think you can clearly see the state is around 50 all the way through the grades. I know this is not a cohort analysis here. And you can see our track is typically in the 60s, progressing up towards the 70s, with the exception of grade 4 math right now. And I guess that would be one I'd like to make sure we understand. Is that just a specific cohort because of perhaps some disconnect at one point in the curriculum, or is there a structural problem? It sounds like
I don't think
as
it's
you're
either of
adjusting your
those.
curriculum,
Yeah, I don't think it's either of those things. I think if we look back, fourth grade scores last year were much stronger than third grade scores, so to speak. I think that there's some students in that grade that
this
have
would
a
have been
variety of
the
needs,
third
not only
grade class that
academically,
had
but
the-
socially and emotionally. So, we're continuing to work with them. I just want to reiterate, and this isn't about a particular fourth grade or anything, but at times, one of the conversations that I have with teachers are helping a student grow socially and emotionally is as, if not more important than moving them academically, because their readiness to learn is so important. I was at a conference not long ago, and the presenter joked, I think I was with Steve, and he said it used to be reading, writing, arithmetic, and now it's reading, writing, arithmetic, and readiness. And so the students face different issues, and so there are times when you may see that, but there's not a way to assess some other things that are making some tremendous growth. So that's certainly an area that, like I said, we noted there's a couple red spots, and particularly the current fourth grade high needs group that we need to work on. But yeah, I think it's not it's not surprising. That's still a very solid, when you think about where we were last year, I think overall this is a success. But we certainly, our team's put together, I didn't bring for you, but 15 to 20 bullets of things to work on at every grade level based on our analysis goes to any question where we were below the state individually, or any question where we were below 80%. We take a look at what was the strand, what was the question, they're not all released, what can we learn about it, and how can we try to not repeat that. And so I try to give you sort of the overview, but there's significant depth going on in looking specifically at grade levels and students and the places that they fell down. So certainly acknowledge that there's work
I
to do there.
recognize there's been a lot of good work going on, and I also just can't leave it unstated.
Of course.
There's this here, but what you just followed up with, that you're you're looking at all of those pieces there. I think it was just important for that to come out.
Yep, absolutely.
And you have to remember, we have small sample sizes.
Yep.
And that, with small sample sizes comes greater swings.
To be honest with you, I pulled those out to think I would put a few in here, and they're so specific to, this question, for whatever reason, we had trouble on, and it was, an algebraic equation with multiple variables, but then this question, they did okay on it. So you're still trying to figure out some of those details. It's not like we went, holy smokes, fractions and decibels, school-wide is a real problem, or otherwise I would be putting it in as an area to work on. I still think writing globally, K-5 is an area that we need to continue to work on. But as far as specific strands and specific things, there's little holes here and there. And we got to remember, some of these things, for instance, fourth grade volume, and I always think to myself, I remember teaching fourth grade and the gallon man and how many, quarts and pints and all that stuff, and I grab the chart every time or my phone every time that I'm, working on something. So I try to reconcile some of the expectations the state has versus what real life is like, and we want to have well-educated, well-rounded citizens when they finish, but how many adults in your circle probably could, rattle off some of those things that, all 50 states and capitals and, those types of things without a resource. So, it's sort of trying to find how we get kids to be as successful as they can be, college, career, life.
It's interesting. When I was in a kindergarten class this morning, we had 3 students working on taking 100 cups and using all the cups and creating a holiday tree that had the right proportions to it. That's kindergarten. If I brought 100 cups in here right now and said to the 4 of us, let's make a holiday tree that's proportioned, we could certainly do it, but I was amazed at how quickly they were putting this holiday tree together. That's kindergarten, for goodness sakes. I can't remember when I was in kindergarten, but I can assure you I wasn't making a holiday tree with my cups.
In keeping with the sports theme, I just want to say that we hit a grand slam with Jason when he was at his interview a couple of years ago. He said how much he loved diving into data and picking it apart. I've never seen a person's face light up, maybe Jerry Lynn's, but I've never seen a face light up as much as Jason's when he gets to get into data. So he has prepared the slides tonight, and we'll be doing the middle school presentation. I do want to add a couple of pieces that I'm sure Jason will bring up in his comments, but as Kelly has always said, MCAS is one piece of data that we use, and there's, we have 3 different map testings during the year. We have midterm grades and grades 3 times a year as well. There's always a student who does extremely well on all of their grades and all of their map testing and does poorly on the MCAS, and we can't figure out why. The student could have been sick the day they were administered. There's always a student who does poorly in class and gets advanced on the MCAS, and you scratch your head about that. So the teachers really take their analysis of the MCAS question by question in the fall. They can't wait to be able to look through that information, and coupled with the map testing, it really does inform their instruction. So I think it is important to note it is one piece of data that we use for our kids. In answering Erica's question, we 2 years ago, Scott and I were given the opportunity to start a grade level on the computer-based testing, and I believe you picked 5th and I picked 8th at the middle school to just try it out. And our students did really well that year, and our tech department, I remember commenting that they were really helpful and instrumental in getting that off the ground and making us not feel worried about it as administrators and teachers who were administering. We did notice the first year that in math, for example, the kids had a hard time dragging the tools, and it was really a product of the test and not the student's ability on the computer, and that did change. Another interesting aspect on the paper test, when you're writing a response, you can turn the pages and physically see how many pages you have. And the first year on the ELA, the students were given X amount of words, and it really wasn't indicated how many, like what amount of space does that many words fill. And so kids were like, did they mean characters? Did they mean words? And so that was a little bit challenging in the first year. Teachers recognized so teachers typed out, this is what this many words look like. And the test also gave that indication. This many words is approximately this many pages, so students had that indication. We felt so confident 2 years ago when just the 8th grade took the test, that last year we decided to dive right in and have all across the board, 6, 7, and 8, go ahead and take the computer-based test, and that was in error in one of the slides. We did, in fact, have the whole school test on computers last year, and we feel like the kids have enough computer skills throughout Russell Street and into the middle school that they were really able to manage the Chromebooks for their testing. So with that, I'll let Jason go ahead to his slides.
Yes, I do love data. I'm a baseball guy, and I keep waiting for the Red Sox to call and offer me a job in the analytics department, but that's clearly not going to happen, so we'll stick to MCAS. The slide that you're looking at here, it is an overview, but I want to dive into this a little bit because I don't think it tells the full story. It also provides me an opportunity to recognize a handful of teachers in our building who are crushing MCAS with their students. They really did. If we look at this slide, the idea of meeting and exceeding expectations and the numbers that you see there, they go beyond that. So what I wanted to find out was just how well are they doing? We know that they're above state standards, but just how far? And I just want to share this with you. Our 8th grade science classes, led by Valerie Finnerty, they were ranked 21st out of 478 8th grade classes across the state, making them in the top 5% of all 8th grade classes statewide. Our 8th grade math classes, led by Amy Manheimer, were 44th out of 479 classes, putting them in the top 10% of all 8th grade classes in the state. Our 7th grade ELA ranked 15th out of 480, making them in the top 3% of all classes statewide. And we have a couple others who were just over the 10% mark. I mention these names to you because we are so fortunate at the middle school level to have students who are dedicated to this process and teachers who are dedicated to this process to do the hard work necessary to prepare these students for this test. And while it is just one measure, and while it is just a part of what we do, there's a certain pride that comes with it and a community pride that comes with it that shows up in the numbers. And I felt it would be a missed opportunity to give these people credit for some of the hard work they do and the students for putting forth that effort. If we want to go to the next slide, please. This is the student growth percentage. And one of the things I wanted to know was, did the previous slide tell one story, but other data points tell something different? And what I found was that it was pretty consistent across the board. If you look at the student growth percentages, and you can see the breakdown at the bottom, where 61 to 99 is higher growth, and you see quite a few 60s on the board. Again, I wanted to see, did those numbers translate? And they certainly did. Within science, our 8th grade science program still remained within that 5% category. It actually made our 8th grade ELA program rise, Jenny Abbott's class, to being 25th in the state at a 5% clip as well. And same with Nicole Caffarelli's 7th grade class, ranking 47th in the state. So what we're seeing with the different data points is that the numbers are starting to show a similarity, a common story as we move through. So if we can go to one more slide, please. This is a cohort analysis where we can compare not this year's test to other kids across the state, but compare students to themselves. And so if you look at the bottom, you'll see the graduating classes of each of the groups that we had testing last year. And you can see their scores in ELA math and in science. And I think the data shows a couple of things. If you look at the class of 2024, you'll notice that the gaps are a little bit staggered there. And I was talking with Cheryl this morning about it, and we really think it has to do with a couple of things. One, you have a group of 6th graders who are moving into a brand new school, right, with new expectations, new teachers, everything is new, and they're taking a test for the first time on the computer. Our teachers were using the test on the computer for the very first time. But what you'll notice, and what I did is I created this same graph with each of those 3 data points that I mentioned, and I laid them over the top of each other, and we see a sort of a commonality between all 3 graphs. You don't see it here. I'd be happy to share it with you later if you want. But what we see is 6th grade is a little bit of a disparity, right? To be expected with all such, with new expectations. And then starting to see a plateau in the 7th grade, where that stability, those resources that we've put in, the time and the effort, and frankly, the knowledge that we have of some of our students that we didn't have when they came into 6th grade. And then finally in 8th grade, where they really start to take off. To me, that shows a school whose resources, programs, and opportunities are doing exactly what we want them to do. Where we're taking kids who are coming in at all sorts of places, we're learning their tendencies, we're learning their needs, we're addressing those needs, providing that structure and stability, and then watching them take flight as they leave the middle school. And so if you look at the particular areas of strength in some of our smaller groups, with our economically disadvantaged students, we're doing really, really well. Double the state averages with students who are economically disadvantaged all the way across the board. Students with disabilities also the same, doubling, in some cases tripling, what the state does with students in that same category. It doesn't mean we don't have areas that we could grow a little bit. Next slide, please. Our high needs students in 6th and 7th grade math, we're on par with where the state averages are. That's a constant source of our discussion and needs and a lot of different perspectives. You have to remember though, for example, 6th grade math, you're starting at square one every time a class comes in. It's a brand new group. By the time they get to 7th and 8th grade, you're able to build momentum. So in 6th grade, you're literally beginning from the ground floor every time. And so these numbers, while they may not show the same staggering results compared to some of the other ones that you've seen, I think, we're actually pretty happy with where we are considering those. And so that's a look at where we are at the middle school level. Are there any questions?
So do the high needs, is that the students with disabilities, ELA?
It's everybody
ELO,
together,
and
yeah.
that's everyone together,
That's
okay.
everyone together. And so that's where you can see, well, we did well with economically disadvantaged and students with disabilities. The other part of that group, where those numbers are a little bit smaller, when we start to put it all together, sort of levels that back down a little bit. So that will be sources of conversation for us. Who are those students? What are those needs that we need to address as we get further into the year?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hello, everybody. Happy to come before you once again this year to report on Littleton High School's results. I also want to recognize our faculty as well as our students, of course, for their outstanding performance once again on the MCAS test. I also want to recognize my colleagues, as I traditionally do, for their hard work. It's no doubt, I think Jason did an excellent job of highlighting individual teachers, and it's no doubt that Littleton High School's results in the future will be a beneficiary, and it will show the promise of the results at the Russell Street School as well as at the middle school. So thank you for all the hard work you've been doing. It's a testament of good things to come. This slide here is an MCAS summary. You've had a chance to look at it in your packet. It compares the high school's results. I think this is more district-wide data that includes district placements, and it compares the differentials between the overall district, not just the LHS, to the state results. And you can see it's a positive report for the most part in the chart. Click ahead. All right. The next slide gives you, it's a little bit different. We were looking at the advanced category. We were wondering why it didn't quite add up. The advanced category for ELA is more around 65, but they rounded up, I believe. When you look at the state profile on the DESE website, it reports this is what's on the state website. 66% advanced, 31% proficient in ELA. And you can see the rest. Again, really solid performance, and this is a trend that has continued for many years at Littleton High School. And you can see the results for math. And I'm proud. I have another slide that will highlight the advanced category. More and more of these competitive suburban districts or high-performing suburban districts look at the advanced category as a benchmark with the legacy MCAS, and we'll see how that will change in the future as we get into the MCAS 2.0. and the computer-based testing. So we'll go to the next slide. Here's a summary of our SGP. The SGP for ELA was moderate at 55, and it's just 5 points below being high. We had high achievement but moderate growth, and I'll have to correct a slide that later says something a little bit different. The advanced, 96% of our students were proficient in or advanced. Again, high achievement, high growth, with an SGP of 71. And then 92% students advanced or proficient in science, primarily in biology, and this is cohort data. So it's reflective of the class of 2020. There is no SGP reported at the high school for science. We'll go to the next slide. Again, this is another way of looking at the data for the public, just in summary. Again, high achievement, high growth in math, and that should say high achievement, moderate growth in ELA, and that's a difference from last year where we had high growth. We did, I think, a noticeable stat that we'll be looking at a little more closely as we go throughout the year, is looking at different cohorts that have gone through and what happened with SGP this past year. It's moderate, it's solidly moderate at 55, nothing to be concerned about, but about a third of the kids that had an SGP were low growth, and we need to take a good look at that and why that was compared to their 8th grade MCAS in ELA. All right, so the next slide, again, highlights, just a different way of looking at it. Again, this is mainly for the public, just to summarize the data. Percentage of students, I'll go down to towards the bottom there, percentage of students with disabilities who score proficient or higher. This is a stat we're quite proud of. We know these students individually, we're proud, and we celebrate their accomplishments because we know what this means for them when they meet score proficient or even hit the needs improvement category, and that means they're going to be eligible for a high school diploma. 88% of our students were proficient or higher in ELA, 70 with student with disabilities, 77% in math, and 73% in science. And as I've noted in past years, in this cohort, the class of 2020, all students with disabilities achieved a passing score, needs improvement or better on the math and ELA MCAS, and as well as, I believe, the science. So they'll be heading on to a high school diploma as long as they meet the local high school requirements for graduation. Areas of strength, this is a slide I think that middle school had instituted a few years back, or maybe it was even at the Russell Street School, but students with disabilities. This is a comparison between the state and ELA, and you can see that Littleton High School outperforms the state considerably. Again, it's a tribute to our special education staff as well as the hard work of our students and commitment from their parents, and of course, the schools leading up to this, and all the work they've done to help these kids along the way develop compensatory strategies and skills that help them to reach the necessary benchmark. We'll go to the next slide. Students with high needs. This includes the various categories I think that Erica pointed out with Jason just a few minutes ago. English language arts, 92%, compared to 80% in the state. Mathematics, 82%, compared to 57% in the state. And in science, you can see the 76% outperforming the state at 31%. So again, another area of worth noting and something to celebrate in Littleton. It takes a village, but it also takes a district for sure. Cohort results. We'll look at these slides here. These are the achievement levels. It gives you a visual representation of the high performance of the cohort over time. Bar graph captures the class of 2020 and their accomplishments and their steady growth in math. And this one is ELA. You'll see the slight difference there for the class of, let's see, it's in 2018, but the class of 2020 were a little higher on the low or very low growth level. And we're going to take a look at the individual students and sort of compare, is that something that's is common, or is that something that's unique to this cohort? Okay, and we're ready to go to the next slide. Achievement levels. Again, that's the math achievement level is posted there. And look at the outstanding advanced dark blue in grade 10. I've sort of already complimented everybody, so we'll move on to the next slide. And then math. You see, this is really something notable. I'd have to look and see how long we've been on a streak of high growth in math with each succeeding cohort. We have an outstanding math department. So again, something to celebrate. And next steps. This is in keeping with past practice, further data analysis and examination of student growth percentiles, especially with students who scored low or very low growth. I noted that. Of course, as the other schools have highlighted in previous year presentations, they're they were steadily working towards preparation for the next generation MCAS and computer-based testing. That takes on an accelerated pace for us now at the high school. The Chromebook program, the one-on-one program will certainly help us with that. And we talked a little bit about that during our proposal in previous years for the one-to-one technology program. We continue to make instructional adjustments as needed. There's extensive analysis done by the teachers in department meetings and individually. We take a proactive approach, and as pointed out in some of the guidance from DESE, we do have frequent communication with parents of academically struggling students and students who scored in the warning category. We take a good look at students coming up from 8th grade too, so we're doing early intervention in 9th grade. So this is for kids preparing for the 10th grade MCAS, and for math and English. We want to make sure that this is basically a 2-year process of getting them ready to do it, to get over that graduation benchmark. And we've had a good success rate. And once again, the spring 2018 results reflect that. These are some resources of where to go for additional MCAS information. And this will be, I believe this is posted on the district webpage, so for parents to access. Happy to answer any questions. I know this has been a long presentation.
We made it longer.
Yeah, so.
It wasn't you guys. It's not us, Daryl. It's not us.
Thank you for your patience.
Any questions or comments on the high school portion?
Ju- Sorry, just one quick one. What's the difference in the very first slide, the overview slide, and then the next ones? So
Okay, so this slide here, this chart, and you saw this in all the buildings' presentations. I believe this data, and I looked over at Dr. Jamie, and I believe this data is district-wide data, and you spoke to this.
Okay, so this includes
out-of-district placements.
out-of-district, okay.
That's correct. And the other is strictly LHS data.
Thank
And
you.
students who enroll after October.
And students who wrote, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Right. Yes, thank you. It is a lot of information. And obviously, the last 2 years, we have the added component of it being a new test, very difficult to draw significant conclusions because we just don't have a broad sample of data in terms of the number of years. And then, of course, we raised some significant issues about whether we ever will truly be able to have the same kinds of discussions we were able to start to have with the old MCAS, for better or for worse. So it'll be evolving. We appreciate you guys giving it that much attention, given that we do have concerns. But I also appreciate the fact that as much work as we put in on this, it's not anywhere near the be-all and end-all of how we evaluate our students and how we make sure they achieve at the level they're capable of. As a matter of fact, I would argue that this may be, in some ways, the least informative and the least important from your perspective because of all the other good things that we're able to do. And we're fortunate in that regard that we've been able to put in different ways of measuring. Not every district has those advantages, and I think we take full advantage of them. We can't ignore it, and we don't. We give it, the required attention. But you guys keep moving beyond that, well beyond that, and that's important for everybody to understand as they look at it. And I think also we raised some good points about, for anybody who's listening at home, if you are going to take an in-depth look at this, you're very welcome to. We'll be on the website, but please keep in mind some of the stuff we talked about. And, the administration has heard our comments, so when they're getting feedback from parents, obviously you can, use that information as to support the way we're looking at it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the effort you put into this and also entertaining me with my questions.
All right, one more presentation, the Next Generation District and School Accountability System.
So before we even start this, we all know how riveting accountability determination is to all of us. I'm not sure what you would like us to do here. I mean, we're open to suggestions. We gave you the information.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine with it being in here.
Is there an argument? Maybe Jerry Lynn can certainly talk about it, or you could just ask some questions if you have any questions. We can handle that.
The PowerPoint, I think, is not in the packet. We put it in the packet. And I would also add on the website, two one-pagers that DESE put out for parents because they're streamlining how they are really improving how they provide information about accountability. So if we put that on the website, that's the summary, but there's 2 one-pagers in addition. And I think the PowerPoint is not in it. We'd be happy to post that at the next time if you have any questions, because there is the policy and the superintendent's goals, and we may
Yes.
end up returning home December 14th.
No, this struck me as just a statement of fact,
Yeah.
you know, that,
All right,
Goodness.
moving on then.
Okay.
Superintendent evaluation goals.
Educator evaluation goals. We have a student learning goal and a professional learning goal. And the first goal I have listed is a student learning goal, 2-year goal. As you know, we've been working on social and emotional learning for a number of years, and we do have programs in our schools that we keep moving forward on. But it's imperative that we implement SEL in everything that we do, and it's logical to realize that most of the time that our students spend in school are in teacher classrooms teaching various subject areas. So in order to truly embrace the concept of helping students move forward with SEL competency acquisition, we first of all need to make sure that our teachers can identify various instructional strategies and link them to specific SEL competency and skill development. So that's what we've been working on for a number of years, but we became a little more methodical this year. We're very fortunate to team up with the Marzano team and the New Art and Science of Teaching. This is something throughout North America that a lot of districts have embraced, and it is a detailed program of review for staff. And when we embarked upon this journey, it wasn't as if we felt that our staff really needed to take a serious reflection of what they were doing in the classroom. They already do incredible things. But what we wanted to do was create an opportunity to facilitate conversation about some of the things that they're doing, share those skill sets with other teachers in our group, and then be confident that they could link instructional strategies to social and emotional competency acquisition in students. So this whole goal focuses on moving that forward, and it's spelled out in various things that we've done. We continue to bring guest speakers in that are high quality speakers that really speak to the importance of developing SEL skills in our students, so that they're resilient, so that they are able to work through conflictual situations and be better for that. And we all know that no matter what we do and where we go, conflict is going to be a natural part of our lives. And if I was to make a general comment about my analysis of all the years I've been in education, I think the one that still comes to the forefront for me is conflict resolution. I mean, when I look at community, state, national, international politics and what's happening out there in terms of just people working together and trying to create better opportunities for the citizens of their area, we still need to encourage people to embrace the concept of having a conversation and a debate and not taking it personally. And that's probably one of the skill sets that I see that has grown the least in the number of years that I've been in education. And it's concerning to me because it's not something that we haven't emphasized, but obviously we need to do something different so that those skill sets not only last 3 or 4 years after they graduate, but they last for a lifetime. And in order for us as a society to continue to flourish, I think that skill set is a key conduit to moving society forward. So, to make a long story short, this whole goal goes beyond that, but that says a lot about what competencies do you need to be able to competently enter into conflict resolution process. And all of the competencies in the capital, or in the castle model more correctly, are key to being able to be a good problem solver. So that's what the goal really embraces. And then it also talks about the fact that when we have these links between instructional strategies and SEL competencies clear, then we're going to move forward K-8, and we already have started to not only put academic learning objectives on the board, but we're going to incorporate SEL objectives as well. And as we continue these discussions, it's imperative that when we write those objectives and goals on the board, that they're student-friendly and not riddled with jargon and acronyms, on and on and on. And we're doing a great job. And Principal Bazidlo had made a great find for us. I can't remember what state it was out of, but we actually found, we love I can statements. I can do this, I can do that. But we found I can statements for social emotional learning from kindergarten right through grade 12 in the various competency levels. I mean, that was an awesome find. That would have taken us a long time to develop. So we're taking a look at those I can statements and obviously tweaking them so that it is in alignment with our philosophical beliefs within our district. So we have made great strides as we move forward. Now, I put a statement in here, just it was on the bottom of the first page, second from the bottom, and I use an acronym, SEC, Social and Emotional Competency. And in order for our students to truly master SEL competencies, those competencies have to be modeled by all adults that they come in contact with. So in order for any school or any district to be successful, our teachers have to have acquired those competencies. And as we all know, in a heterogeneously grouped population of educators or wherever you go, people will be at various levels of that competency acquisition. And part of our job as leaders is to help those educators continue to move along the line, along the process of developing higher skill sets or more developed skill sets within those competencies. I firmly believe, research will back it up, that it doesn't matter what you do in terms of implementation of programs, they will not be successful and these skills will not permeate throughout your student population unless the teachers that are modeling that behavior have acquired those competencies. So all of this ties into what we've been doing in the last 4, 5, 6 years. If you remember, 7 years ago, we introduced a 21st century model of learning. And it included a bunch of areas, but it also included social and emotional development of students. So this is not new to us. We've been doing this for a number of years. But what we're doing as we move along and evolve is we're becoming more strategic and targeted in terms of how we're implementing SEL in our students. And the bigger question is, there's a whole bigger community out there that we somehow need to figure out how to engage, because the best way to do this is to have the community also understand the language and understand the importance of helping their children master the various skill sets that fall under the competency levels. And I remember years ago in a community I had when I was a regional superintendent, our behavior in our schools in that community, our student behavior was great. But when they were out in the community playing various sports, hockey comes to mind, since it was in Canada, there was no transfer of what we were doing in our schools in terms of what our kids were doing in the arenas. And it was really frustrating. So we had a couple of community forums, and there were good discussions, but tough discussions. Like, why wasn't there a transference? And I see that all the time. I mean, when I come across certain students in different setups, different environments, sometimes they do not carry our philosophies and our beliefs with them. And it's always intriguing to me how they can do this for 6 hours a day and beyond, and then put them in some environment that somehow isn't working, and we have a definite regression. It's always intriguing to me. And we actually had one of those this year that one of the principals and I were dealing with. And so again, I hate using the old cliche, it takes a village to raise a child, but there's certainly a lot of merit to that. And we need to do what we can, excuse me, to help our community work with us to ensure that our kids are attaining those various skills and competencies. And as leaders, we also need to model that behavior. And I think we do a good job of it. I really do. And it would be my wish, and I already shared the Castle model, the schematic that we created with our interim town administrator, and had conversations with him about, how do we talk about this with other elected boards in our community? Because I think it's important that they're aware of what we're doing and we start using the same language. And if we're all striving to be role models for our children in our community, we'll continue and will enhance the success that we're already having. So that's my first goal, and it's a 2-year goal as we continue to move through it. And then at the very end, before we go into the professional practice goal, I talk about how do we start assessing how well we do these things? And there are quantitative measures and there are qualitative measures. And those qualitative measures are very important. Quantitative measures, simple ones, would be attendance records, discipline referrals, etc. But quite often, quantitative measures lack context. So we're really focusing a lot on qualitative measures. And then I'm going to make a statement, and I want you to ponder this statement. When we're helping students develop soft skills, or whatever we want to call them, we can call them SEL competencies, there are some things that we will never be able to know how we've been successful. For example, how many things have we prevented because of our focus on SEL within our district in terms of having kids think about what they were doing before they did something? How many situations have we prevented? We'll never know that, but that certainly has to be a thought that we ponder. And when I ponder about that statement, I take a look at how many students have been in serious trouble in our community, how many students have been put in situations through no fault of their own, and they've managed to maneuver through those situations and be successful in their endeavors. Those are very powerful things that we need to consider as we continue to move forward with SEL. Any questions about student learning goal?
Just a comment, I'm glad you closed with that, because I think that's where I was going to go with is what do you view success in this being, and what kind of indicators? And I don't want to go to specific measures there, but more than just we've implemented the program, everybody's doing it, those second level, higher level observables there, and making sure that's a clear objective of the goal here.
Whenever I'm in schools, again, I've had the luxury of being on evaluation teams in my career, so I always have an evaluation hat on. I look for what's happening in classrooms, on the playgrounds, what kind of interactions our students are having, how teachers are using SEL strategies to help students through conflict situations, and even to the point, how welcome do you feel in that school when you're walking through that school? And I really reflect on that a lot, and I always look for indicators. But when I'm in K5, which is all grades are incredible. But the K5, it's really interesting, because when they see an adult that comes in with a suit and tie and has this title, they can sometimes be a little intimidated. But, you know, I don't know how many times I go into schools, have conversation with kids, and they give me high fives or low fives, and they initiate conversations with me. It's not me initiating those conversations with them. They say good morning, for example. And that says a lot in itself. They have that confidence level to initiate those kinds of conversations. So we look for all of those kinds of indicators. And I'm going to go back to responsive classroom at Russell Street School. I mean, we've had that program for a while, and it's not a curriculum, but it helps cement and develop standards, SEL standards. And what I see what that program has done, I mean, it's actually, it's done incredible things. Those morning meetings, the structure that's put into those meetings really helps our students move forward in situations and areas that they may not be comfortable with. And I go back to I mean, anybody in this room could go back and think about, well, what was it like when you were in elementary school or middle school or whatever? And more often than not, you can reflect on situations that were difficult for you. And what we're trying to do is make sure that our students have those skill sets to maneuver through those difficult situations. I think it's pretty hard to go through life without being involved in disagreements or in situations where you feel mistreated. But the key is to develop those skill sets to get through those situations and flourish and continue to grow. Now, my professional practice goal, sometimes I think, I don't know what happened to me in terms of completing a dissertation and saying one and done. And I remember years ago I had an opportunity to hook on with the university, and I was still pretty young as an assistant principal. Kids were in diapers, and it just happens to be the same university that Jason went to. So if I would have taken that opportunity, I might have actually had an opportunity to help Jason become who he is today. But I didn't.
I felt it. Osmosis, it just remained on
There you go.
until I could walk into it.
Exactly.
Put it in for a raise.
We're hearing a lot of that tonight. So I helped, as you know, I helped a colleague of mine finish his dissertation, mentor him through his dissertation. And it was on social emotional learning, and he did a study on a medium-sized district in terms of where they were at with program implementation. And was it implemented with fidelity? Was there a connection or a disconnection between leaders in the district and principals and teachers? So through that process, we really were able to get to know each other. And through a conversation, he said to me one day, you know what, why don't we write an article for Ed Leadership or some other journal? I said, yeah, it's not a bad idea. Something I've wanted to do. And so we sat down and started this process, and then we started researching an area specific to how do principals help instill teacher SEL competencies. It's really an acronym, SEC. And how does professional development play a role? And how does evaluation play a role in helping teachers develop these competencies or continue to evolve in those areas? The literature doesn't have a lot of research done, so we thought, you know what, we're going to do this. Let's go back and do some research, because we can certainly add to the research base. So, having said that, that involves a whole different process, and it's a whole new dissertation. It involves selling the research concept to a university. We obviously chose Northeastern to sell it to. Once we had buy-in on their topic of research, then we had to sell how we were going to do it. What's our methodology? What's our theoretical framework? We're using a transcendental phenomenological approach for our methodology. And we're using, I love Kagan's theory of constructive developmental theory of adult development. So we're going to do that. Our actual research data is going to use a survey to identify principals that have developed SEL programs, and it focused on professional development. And then we're gonna do surveys, and we're gonna compare the results from the survey and the results from the interviews. And then we're gonna present our results using a descriptive phenomenological approach, which really minimizes researcher bias. In other words, what we're gonna use is we're gonna capture comments from the people that we interview, and that's going to compose our results section of the study. And then we'll draw some conclusions and develop some statements on best practices and how could schools move forward in instilling social emotional competencies within their staff. So what happened to be, well, it started out as a paper, turned into a dissertation, and then I've mapped it all out. Year 2, we will take the dissertation, and then we need to cut it down and publish it. We want to publish it in a variety of journals. Each journal has their own requirements, and their own format, and their own word and their own word count as well. So just thought it would be something that would be interested in. I would be interested in doing, and again, we can move forward and be known as leaders in that area as well, and help other districts and schools move forward with helping teachers move along the SEL competency paradigm, so to speak. So that's the professional practice goal. The RIB is called an Internal Review Board application, which is necessary before they allow you to do research. It was submitted 2 days ago. It was approved by, we had to have a professor buy in as well, and then we sent it to the IRB board, and then they get back to us and say, yeah, we think what you're doing is sound and it's not biased, and you're treating your subjects appropriately. So that's where we're at. Questions?
Do you require a motion on this, because this becomes part
No,
of your evaluation?
no.
Okay.
No, we, as long as I want to keep you informed of what we're doing. Mike and I had talked about this a couple of months ago, for me, it was interesting because I really, for the first goal, the student learning goal, I really enjoyed that shadowing experience, and it was really hard for me to give that up and not do it again. But when I look at everything that we do in our district, I really felt that the continued movement of SEL strategy development and focusing on student skill acquisition was more important than the shadowing for this year. So put that aside.
And it's probably odd to say, but I think we ought to keep the target date for your evaluation in mind too, because we want to, again, I think get keep in that practice of getting it done before the board turnover.
Yes,
between
correct.
the election there. So that will. So only December, but we're telling you the deadline's coming up soon.
Right. But we've been working on these goals, thank goodness. Or it'd be like the old blizzard bag
Well.
situation where you're like one of those kids trying to do all of the assignments.
No, we'll expect you to work on it on the blizzard days. The students can have the day off.
Oh, okay. I can't play in the snow.
All right, we're good on that?
Yep.
All right, we're at the second section for input from interested citizens. No one
Who's in
dares.
our audience?
Good. Subcommittee reports, Budget Subcommittee. We met last week. We're preparing to basically make the same presentation that we made at our last meeting here to the Budget Summit with the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom. We're going to add some supporting data and context relative to our enrollment, average spending per pupil relative to where we are across the state. So we're kind of putting that information together. That meeting is on January 5th, so even though we're going to go on holiday break, we'll actually have to keep an eye on that and make sure that we're prepared for that meeting. And we will be. I'm not worried about it, but it does require us to get it done. And that is it for budget policy.
We have a second reading on the policies that we discussed last meeting. I know Jen isn't here, but there really wasn't anything that was out of the ordinary on those policies. So I feel comfortable, moving them forward. There's some minor word changes that just put them more in tune with the current language that is used. So, anybody have any questions on those policies?
No. Entertain motion.
Make a motion to approve the following revised policies, policy ACE, BDE, BDF, and FA.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None.
And then make a motion to approve the following reviewed policies, policy ADC and policy DEDB.
Reviewed policies with no recommended
With
changes.
no changes. Yep.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
I was gonna comment, I thought, based on the date of policy ADC tobacco, where we, several years ago, addressed electronic cigarettes, as other communities are just starting to wrestle with that problem.
That's right.
Wrestle's not the, trying not to go underwater.
That's true. And just to comment, I know Olivia spent a lot of time with us the last few years and graduated in college, and I guess we didn't treat her too bad because she came back tonight and actually stayed for actually, it is our longest meeting that we've had since September.
You're welcome.
My theory is that Olivia is the first one from her class back from college, and she literally had nothing better to do. And if she had any other offer, she would have done it.
2-hour-long lectures every day really help extend your, like,
See?
I think so. I had 4 hours of lecture essentially every day.
Nice attention span, right?
Yeah. Also,
All right,
whenever you guys do MCAS results, I get hooked for some reason.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Future school committee
Second.
member.
Motion made second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, LCTV. Thank you, everyone. Have a good holiday season.
Yes.
We'll see you next year.